In accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, be advised that a notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board in Town Hall and electronically forwarding to the officially designated newspapers, that this meeting would take place at Town Hall and remotely at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, June 15th, 2021. Meeting details and the draft agenda were also posted on our township website. Please all stand to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Have a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Miggins? Here. Ms. Paul Edwell?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Wasserman?
Here.
Mr. Benaya?
Here.
Mayor Lucas?
Here. Thank you. Until further notice, agendas will have one public comment period. Notice public hearings of ordinances and other matters will be held as required. Those who wish to contact Township Committee members or staff, please feel free to reach out via email, mail, or the drop box located in front of Town Hall. Please visit our website or contact Town Hall if you require guidance on how to contact your public officials. Please note that Resolution 21-174 was withdrawn from consideration prior to the meeting and was posted as updated. Resolution 21-183 confirming the appointment of a member to the Affordable Housing Litigation Management Steering Committee will be removed from the consideration this evening. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as noted?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? May I have a motion to approve the March 23rd, 2021 Township Committee minutes?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We have a proclamation tonight for the National Night Out. Deputy Mayor Wasserman is going to present it to Chief Bill.
Maybe I'll need to go. Okay, we'll take pictures now. All right. Proclamation from Millburn. Whereas the National Association of Town Watch sponsors a national community building campaign on Tuesday, August 3, 2021, entitled National Night Out. And whereas the National Night Out campaign provides an opportunity for neighbors in the township of Millburn to join over 38 million neighbors across approximately 16,000 communities from all states, U.S. territories, and military bases worldwide. And whereas the National Night Out is an annual community building campaign that promotes police community partnerships and neighborhood camaraderie to make our neighborhoods safer, more caring place to live. And whereas neighbors in the township of Millburn assist the Millburn Police Department through joint community building efforts and support National Night Out 2021. And whereas it is essential that all neighbors of the township of Millburn come together with police and work together to build a safer, more caring community. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Township Committee of the Township of Millburn and the County of Essex, State of New Jersey, do hereby call upon all neighbors of the Township of Millburn to join the Millburn Police Department and National Association of Town Watch in support for National Night Out on Tuesday, August 3rd, 2021. So proclaimed. Congratulations, Chief.
Thank you.
Tonight we'll be confirming the promotions of 2 members of the police department through resolution 21-166. Chief, would you like to give some background and present?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say thank Mayor and Township Committee for allowing the police department to present the supervisors for promotion. Tonight, we're going to have for promotion 1 sergeant and 1 lieutenant. First, it's going to be Peter Schmaraldo for sergeant. He graduated from the Essex County Police Academy, worked in West Orange Police Department from September 2009 to March of 2011. He was hired by the Millburn Police Department in October of 2011 and signed to the Patrol Division. He graduated from Thomas Edison University with a degree in criminal justice and history. He's been a DARE teacher for 5th grade students for the past 8 years. He's trained in crisis intervention and will be assigned as a supervisor of our traffic bureau. Peter is accompanied by his wife, Sarah, daughter Hazel, family and friends. And for promotion to lieutenant, we have Gil Tavares, graduated from Seton Hall Prep, attended NJIT. He began his public safety career in the year 2000 as a corrections officer with the New Jersey Department of Corrections. He worked there for 3 years. He was hired by Essex County Police Department and achieved the rank of detective. In 2007, he transferred to the Millburn Police Department and worked here for the past 15 years. He served as a training officer. He has received numerous awards and commendations, including 2 life-saving awards. He was promoted to sergeant in 2018 and was assigned to the Patrol Division. And in 2020 was assigned as a supervisor of the police department's traffic bureau. Join Gil tonight is his parents, Armando, Lucille, sister Shirley, and daughter Emily, and friends.
May I have a motion to approve resolution 21-166, which confirms these 2 promotions?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Higgins?
Yes.
Ms. Gallego?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Wasserman?
Yes.
Mr. Benaya?
Yes.
Mayor Klukas?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Scotty, will you now issue the oath of offices?
Want someone to come and? She can come too. Yes, please.
She can help.
Yeah, she-
You're gonna be right by-
Oh,
We're gonna do this.
maybe we'll move over here.
Go wherever you
so we're
like.
not- That would be, thank you for telling me.
Yeah.
Wanna hold it? That's okay. I'm gonna raise your right hand.
I state your name,
I, Peter Schmaraldo,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
I will support the Constitution
I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of New Jersey,
of the State of New Jersey,
and I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of police sergeant
of the duties of police sergeant
of the Millburn Township Police Department
of the Millburn Township Police Department
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Let me just sign this for me.
Thank you.
Gil. Are you ready?
Gonna raise your right hand. I state the name,
I, Gilbert Tavares,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
I will support the Constitution
I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of New Jersey,
of the State of New Jersey,
and I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of police lieutenant
the duties of police lieutenant
of the Millburn Township Police Department
of the Millburn Township Police Department
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
You know what, dude? All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
I'll just sign this.
We're excited. Congratulations.
No, guys, it's all good.
Shake, shake. Shake.
Yes, this is all good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're going to take 20 seconds for our officers to get back to work if you'd like to leave the room now, or anyone else. Just take a moment. Thank you.
The audio will be fine for the day. It may not be picking up that. Unfortunately, until we get that computer set up and running, just using this one right here.
Thank you so much.
I also left and texted somebody to make sure.
YouTube working.
Jesse, what are you?
Okay. The sign ordinance review subcommittee has finalized our community survey that will be going out on Friday. The Taylor Park Entrance Revitalization Subcommittee is working to finalize the RFP for a landscape architect. Registration for the Tour de Millburn scheduled for September 12th, 2021 is now open for Millburn residents. The township hosted a Zoom public information session on redevelopment on June 16th at noon. This webinar provided information on what redevelopment is and what a redevelopment study entails. The second session will be held on June 21st at 7:30 p.m. and you must register in advance for the webinar. After registering, you will receive a confirmation email containing information about joining the webinar. It has annually been a tradition for the committee to host a holiday party. However, last year the event had to be canceled. So this year we're offering a new and exciting opportunity for us to celebrate our incredible volunteers. We're going to have a party next Tuesday on June 22nd. So that's going to be really exciting and nice for us all to come together. We've been working so hard with all of our committees, all the residents and volunteers. So we're really excited about next Tuesday night. And just to repeat that I am happy to meet with the public during my regular scheduled office hours, Thursdays from 9 to 11. Meetings shall be set up by appointment and confirmed. To schedule an appointment, please contact me at tprupis@millburntwp.org. And that concludes my report for tonight. Oh, it concludes.
Okay,
Committeewoman
yes.
Egel, you are up.
Yes. Hi, good evening. Welcome back, everybody. Last week, we had our third annual raising of the Pride flag. We had a really good turnout. The high school, the paper mill, our town hall employees came out. Residents were there, so it was a really nice community event. Also, last week, Committeewoman Biggins and I had a chance to go to the first ever inaugural Eagle Scout Court of Honor at St. Rose. 5 amazing young women were given proclamations signed by the mayor. I'll just give their names a shout out. Bridget Lomax, Raya Tiegi, Katie Cannon, Kira Loudon, and Morgan Lomax. And it was just amazing to hear the accomplishments of these 5 young women who made Eagle Scout in 2 years. And Congressman Malinowski was there to congratulate them, had lovely words. And anything you want to add?
It always amazes me. I think our scouts are our future leaders. And I said that day, you know, they showed up in force for the Memorial Day parade as well. They didn't let a little soft mist bother them. And I think they're just tremendous leaders, and the work that they did was incredible, the things that they were creating. So we should be very impressed with our students and our future leaders.
It's fun. So thank you for attending.
It was fun.
Committeewoman Megan.
Well, I have 2 things to talk about. We had the Arboretum had their meeting, and it's the last 2 years we've had a bird called the wood thrush, and that's a very positive thing for the Arboretum because it means that it's a sign of a healthy ecosystem and the forest. So that's all positive. They were so pleased. very last minute, there are just a couple openings for the 4-year-old program. For anyone who has 4-year-olds that might want something to do this summer at the Arboretum, please call them. That's really important. The one thing I'll leave with on, which is so disturbing, I have to tell you, is somebody vandalized the sign and it's totally destroyed. The Arboretum sign has been totally destroyed and they really had to work like heck to destroy it. It's so disheartening to me. I don't know who vandalized it. There's been a police report. So when you're driving by there, you'll see that there's no Arboretum sign. It's so disheartening. And probably to build a new one is going to be anywhere between $5,000 and $7,000. So I'm so very, I share that with the township because I think that's very disappointing that somebody would do that. And they're just as disappointed as well. Somebody had done it once and they jury rigged it. And so now it's completely destroyed and missing. So it's just something to think about. And then I was also with, I am the liaison to the Historic Preservation Committee. And so I am, the Township Committee has tasked Barton to do some surveys for us. And so I'm coming back to the Township Committee with this and to Alex. The HPC is not getting cooperation from the Historical Society in terms of the photos. There's over 6,000 photos and data that the HPC, which is a municipal land use board, needs to have access to. And they're not getting access to it. And that's troublesome. And so I want to task you, please, to find out who exactly owns the records. Does the Historic Preservation Committee own the records? Or does the Historical Society own the records? Because these records are very important and vital to the history of our community. And if we don't have records, that's a problem. And Barton, we pay Barton to be the liaison, the architect for the HPC. If he's got to spend, instead of a 20-minute search for something, has to spend 2 and 3 hours, that's costing us money. So we really need to get to the bottom of that. Who owns those records? And how can we get copies of those records? And maybe how can the Township Committee get copies of those records? And maybe we could have a set of records for the library. I just feel that we need to do something about that. So I'm tasking you, Alex, with please trying to find that out. Who owns the records?
Yep, I'll look into it.
And then also being told that HPC can't sit on the board at the Historical Society, something about it being a conflict of interest. Can you look into that for us, Kit, to see if there's a conflict of interest on that? Something with Historical Society saying HPC can't be involved with them. I'd like to know about that as well. I think we should all be working together. And those are my 2 reports. Thank you.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
Bosworth.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I do want to point out to our residents that with the appointment of tonight's police officer, that it brings our staffing of the police department up to 58 officers, which is at our capacity. And I'll also point out that Committeewoman Eglo and I think a year ago, we increased the force by 4 officers, and it's just wonderful to have all of our police, at our service, and they do a great job for us. I also want to point out that from CETA, that our sculpture has broken ground, and it's, I always love saying the name of it. We are all together now. That sculpture, they're working on it. I hope that it's going to be completed in the next couple of weeks. They're pouring the concrete. If you pass Taylor Park, you'll see that they're working on it. And lastly, I want to mention for Explore Millburn that there's a new social media program for our merchants. It's called Meet the Merchants. It's a special social media product for any merchants in the township. And I think Jesse.
Deputy Mayor, unfortunately, due to the technical issues, we're not going to be able to show that video at this particular time, but perhaps during the end of the meeting, under our new or old business, we'll be able to get that.
Oh, great. We're going to share like a clip of what we're offering our merchants. And also for Explore Millburn, we also have our wonderful music playing around the township during the summer, and I hope everybody's enjoying that.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a liaison to Rec Commission, and they are really working hard on raising the $275,000 to light the library field. They are able to get, I think, almost 175 out of 275, but a little bit more than that. Now, another, I think, 100 or 90K is what they're looking for. Residents has been kind, they've been sending over checks, and there are other places that they were able to get money from. So that's a great news. Second is they're also looking at cricket has become a new sport in town. A lot of families are playing it. So they're looking to put in a cricket pitch in one of the grounds. So those are my reports.
Mr. Falcon?
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of quick items. On the library renovation project, my partner Brad Carney has completed the review along with the project architect and the library director of the contract documents, and the bid documents to meet the requirements of the contracts law. It's very close to be put out to bid. We ran into an interesting problem in that the project will be underway on election day, and it is a polling place. So we provided in the contract that the project will be halted between the time when the election equipment is delivered by the county, the voting takes place, and then gets removed. There'll be a clear path between the entrance door and the elevator to go up to the polling place. So everybody will have safe and clear access in and out of the polling place. Secondly, the mediation sessions continue. The steering committee met with the township committee before this meeting to report on the status of the mediations and negotiations and to receive direction from the township committee going forward. The steering committee is scheduled to have a mediation this Friday, presided over by a special master manager. That's all I have.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just would like to remind the community about the 4th of July events that will be taking place. In particular, the fireworks display that will be put on by the 4th of July committee on that evening at the Millburn High School. So I hope that everybody can get out and enjoy it. Certainly nice to have all of these community events back in town. Wanted to also just report that the Main Street closure will take place for the summer, starting on June 24th. Again, that will be from June 24th through August 30th. The Main Street closure will take place. Just another report regarding sort of downtown and is that the preemption system that the township had funded through capital improvement in previous years has been completed to allow for the Millburn Fire Department as well as the First Aid Squad to preempt the lights on Millburn, Maine, Millburn and Lackawanna, Essex and Lackawanna, Essex and Maine to allow for their flow through the downtown area. Lastly, I'd like to make the announcement here that these township committee proceedings will go back to fully in person starting in August. We have noticed a meeting in July with a remote option. However, no further notices will provide for a remote option. August will be the next, the August meeting will be fully in person. As you're here tonight, we've lifted the mask mandate in town hall with the guidance of what's happening in the state, the CDC, and the governor's orders. So we're also looking forward to getting back to normal here in these proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. I wish to comment upon an incident which occurred over the weekend of June 5th. Mr. Jeffrey Feld, an attorney who resides in the township, issued an email to the township committee, the township attorney, the attorney defending the Bear Properties lawsuit on behalf of the township, Ms. Perry Urso, Ms. Pasternak, Ms. Stone, Ms. Dominique Urso, Mr. Footer, Mr. Cosgrove, Mr. Morial, the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, and various news organizations. In it, he spoke of, quote, whether the medical condition of a certain TC member must be disclosed to the public. Quote. I speak for all members of this township committee, as well as the many women in the community who have heard about this and from whom we have heard that we are uniformly appalled by Mr. Feld's insensitivity, invasion of privacy, and abandonment of common, ordinary, decent behavior. Mr. Feld, you are wrong. Please sit down.
Stand. You're addressing me.
Mr. Feld, you are disrupting the meeting. Please sit down.
Disrupting me.
This is not a frivolous issue. It is an outrageous suggestion coming from a man who repeatedly introduces himself at meetings of the Township Committee as an attorney at law of the state of New Jersey and an officer of the court. What you would seemingly require from every member of this committee is the disclosure of any illness and whether any treatments received or medicine taken by them could impair their judgment. You obviously have become aware of circumstances surrounding an illness on the part of one of the female members of this Township Committee. What could possibly motivate you to suggest such an outlandish disclosure on her part? Have elected officials in the state of New Jersey ever been asked or required to disclose their illness or medications before a vote? Has any governing body, any county commissioner, any member of the legislature been asked to disclose such information before casting a vote? Your suggestion is obviously neither legitimate nor well-meaning. It is instead a manifestly targeted, disparaging comment, which is callous and incredibly poor taste. There have obviously been circumstances over the years when a member of the committee has missed the meeting or meetings due to an illness. We have all had the good sense to know when that is appropriate. I am confident that this will continue without the implementation of the disclosure process, which you have so transparently, disingenuously, and pointedly offered. Tonight, we have Mark Robeson, who will present the Whittingham Triangle Pollinator Garden and website update. Can we actually do that? Do we have access for that? No. Mark, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening, Township Committee members.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I had a presentation to go along with this, so we're going to instead rely on a little theater of the mind, but I'm going to be able to give you a bit of an update, and hopefully most of you will be able to recognize the locations we're talking about. So I'm Mark Robison. I am the chair of the Millburn Creative Collective, which I'll be giving a brief report on after this, but my capacity is with another community effort that is just come about, which is the Whittingham Triangle Pollinator Garden. So Whittingham Triangle is a large traffic island located at the intersection of Whittingham Terrace and Mountain View Road across from Taylor Park. Elizabeth Bullivon has been working on this project and had the insight that this was a real opportunity to take basically a barren space within our community and turn it into something that can become more, to truly beautify the township as well as adding greater ecological benefit. With her spearheading this, myself coming on board as well as Renee Paparian, who is part of leads the green team or is co-chair of the green team. This is becoming an increasingly larger community effort. So I had a lovely rendering to show you what the garden was going to look like, but just suffice it to say right now, we've really imagined this as a pollinator garden as well as a pocket park. So allowing people to have access to the site. So the conditions of the site, as we kind of undertook this effort, the soil was a bit rough, but with the support of the township, Alex McDonald, Tom Doty, and the DPW, we were able to amend the soil to basically support the sorts of prairie species that we're going to be using in the site. The site was then mulched to help prepare the site for planting, as well as reduce weed competition in the next couple of years. We have a planting plan, which again is part of the document. Maybe that can be shared later in another fashion over the web. But the planting plan will feature 7 species that will be planted from plugs over the next several weeks throughout the summer. These 2-inch plugs are a cost-effective way to put established plants in there in a planting plan, but to really kind of give us a jump start rather than starting from seed, but keeping the cost down from buying fully developed plants. To be clear, it will take a year or two for this space to fully develop, to become a full-fledged meadow. But we should start to see flowering within the next year, if not this year. The plant palette itself, the species were selected because they're native to the region. It'll also create a cadence of flowering from late spring to mid-fall. And the plants selected are some of the most attractive to our basically native pollinators in the region. Most of these plants were also selected because they'll naturally keep a very low profile, maintaining clear sight lines for traffic across the triangle. 2 species will have a maintenance schedule where they'll be selectively pruned once a year to reduce their natural height to be under the 30-inch max target that we want for the entire meadow. And this will also encourage more and prolonged flowering. Basically, the design itself has attractive massings, but suffice it to say, it is undoubtedly a meadow in composition and function, but by creating these massings, it helps communicate a cohesive and organized design. Sometimes native plant designs can sometimes come across as too wild. So there's a number of design implementations we've done here. Other architectural elements in the site to show the hand of design include a path that will allow people to move through the space, basically from one curb cut of the sidewalk to another, as well as allow access to the oak tree that's already on site and a proposed bench in a small clearing in between. A birdhouse will also rise above the plantings, and we're planning on a tidy 4-foot mown strip around the perimeter to further communicate plant or design intent. Finally, 2 permanent interpretive signs will communicate the function and benefit of the space at the heads of the path. These signs will communicate that the area is a recognized pollinator pathway, a monarch way station, and recognize the community sponsors and contributors who have helped make this effort possible. The project sponsors on that note, we've received funds to help pull this off from the Short Hills Garden Club, the Millburn Environmental Commission, and the Millburn Short Hills Chamber of Commerce. And finally, why it was critical that I list this today, we are having a planting day. Planting day will be June 26th. That's not this coming Saturday, but the following Saturday. We will be meeting at 7 a.m. So anybody who isn't familiar with planting, we can give you a brief tutorial and allow you to literally dig in. So if you are interested in joining, please RSVP to Renee Preparian at renee.greenteam@gmail.com. And before I move on to the second part of the presentation related to the Millburn Creative Collective, are there any questions or comments regarding this?
I do want to apologize for the technical difficulty. We'll make sure that the presentation is up on the website as a news feed tomorrow.
Fantastic, thank you.
With planting day information.
With planting day.
So you can get some volunteers.
Yes.
Thank you so much for all your work on the triangle. It's gonna look great.
My pleasure. And secondly, the Millburn Creative Collective has launched a website. Basically, the Millburn Creative Collective is an organization that really means to promote arts and culture in Millburn and really start to draw people together and create a kind of greater creative culture. We've been working with a lot of the partners around town in the launch of our website, which went live in early May. It is at millburncreativecollective.org. And right now we've just updated much of the content and as a little featurette, we're actually highlighting the Paper Mill Playhouse because they've got a lot going on this summer. And so please go to the site and check that out. Additionally, for those who are in the creative class sort of professions, please visit the site because there's much there for you too. We have a creative directory. The creative directory is basically allows any Millburn resident who works in a creative field to create their own directory listing. I would also encourage any resident who needs a graphic designer, an illustrator, or a photographer to go on there and look, because the directory is made up entirely of those who live or own a business in town. More than that, we have creative spotlights. Creative spotlights are short bios that highlight some of the individuals we have in town. We now have 4 spotlights up that really highlight the talent and diversity that we have right here in Millburn. So these short bios are fantastic. I would really encourage everyone to check those out as well. The contact info, if you would like to list an event, by the way, please reach out. There's a contact page on the website, and that's Millburn Creative Collective at outlook.com. I actually monitor that, but or you could reach out to me personally. But please, if you have a creative, either public event or ticketed event that you would like to promote that falls into the creative sphere, please reach out and we'll be happy to list your event. We've been working with CETA, Explore Millburn, and Paper Mill Playhouse in order to already start to list a lot of events around town. And hopefully this becomes kind of a clearinghouse for all things creative in Millburn. So lastly, I'd like to thank the committee for their, I put together a proposal and ultimately you helped provide the funds to make this a reality. So I thank you for that. So.
Thank you. You're
Thank you.
doing so much
Thanks for all
work
your
for
work.
us this year. Thank you
Is
so
there a way
much.
to put it up on our own township site? Like a link for
Yeah.
that? Like the
Creative
website? Yeah.
Collective,
I think that might
absolutely.
be an
It's
idea.
part of the umbrella of the green team. So awesome. Mark also sits on CETA, so thank you so much.
Yep, my pleasure.
The Township Committee will now consider consent agenda resolutions. Please note Resolution 21-174 and Resolution 21-183 was withdrawn from consideration. Are there any comments from the committee in regards to any items listed on the consent agenda?
I do. I have a question. It has to do with the inactive liquor licenses. Can you just kind of explain that to me a little bit? And who exactly owns these liquor licenses? I know that I see Millburn Standard. What is the Millburn separate one?
That's moonshine.
That's Moonshine. And what's the Sam and Rye Enterprises? Pardon?
Unwind.
Unwind Boutique. So those are the 3 that were renewed. Okay.
We renewed a bunch at the last meeting.
Pardon?
We renewed the others at the last meeting.
Right. I just was curious about this. Okay. That's all I got. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee?
No question.
Okay. Resolutions 21-172, 21-173, and 21-184 will be considered separately as detailed on the agenda. May I have a motion to approve Resolution 21-167 through Resolution 21-185, except those noted to be considered separately, which are listed on the consent agenda.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Megan?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Wasserman?
Yes.
Mr. Romano?
Yes.
Mayor Curtis?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any comments from the committee or questions in regards to Resolution 21-172, awarding the contract for animal control services to Animal Control Solutions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So this is privatizing the animal control, that's correct?
Correct.
Okay. And my question is, currently, if there's a stray cat, dog found, where is it that our animal control puts the strays? Or if somebody's lost their dog?
Generally, that is usually with a veterinarian or a shelter in the area. But it is at times hit or miss as to where they have the ability to do that.
So Millburn currently today does not specifically have a certain vet or shelter that we send our
Not,
animals?
not a particular shelter, but we do use the vet on Millburn Avenue in Maplewood.
Okay, so that's, so, I mean, I remember picking up my dog there who got out, so I get that. So when I see something like Summit Dog and Cat Hospital, that's also the same type of thing,
That's for veterinarian services.
veterinarian services for animals,
Correct.
but we don't have any animals.
We do. When they're in the care of the animal control.
Yep.
And there's an injury.
Yep.
They are required to give them treatment.
Okay, got it. So then my question is, with this new company, where are they putting the strays?
So they have agreements with several shelters in the area.
Yep.
Give you some of those. They have a contract with the with several, and I can provide you with this information.
Here's why I asked, somebody loses their dog.
Mhm.
How do they know what shelter? How are we gonna provide that information of what shelter specifically that dog might be at?
So that would be information that's given to dispatch, and dispatch would be, and certainly the animal control provider would be getting the information to those owners. Because if the dog is picked up and has an owner.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Either they're chipped or whatever, they'll be able to contact the owner and let them know where the dog is.
Okay, so we have no concerns that since this company's in Flemington, that they're not gonna transport dogs all the way down to Flemington or down to the shore. It's gonna be local.
I think that's gonna depend on space. But I think I'm far more interested in that they have several contracts with area shelters, Mount Pleasant being one of them, that are licensed and inspected and in good form.
Okay, I just wanna make sure, I'm an animal lover. I wanna make sure if somebody loses their animal, that they don't have to drive to East Jabib to get it, that's all.
East Hanover.
Okay. Not East Jabib, not East Jabib. Fair enough, I'm good with that.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, so animal control is something that we have worked on together. It generally, we have 2 full-time employees in the township. Cost about roughly $275,000. And we were taking care of animal control for 4 other towns. And they were paying us $5,000 each for the full year. So overall, our cost was about, say, $300,000 to $400,000 to do animal control. And the service that we are going to get is going to be about $30,000 to $40,000. And that provides everything that we have today. The amount that the owner will have to pay is also the same thing that they would pay today if the animal control takes them somewhere. Again, all this initiative also started from the township, so it's a process improvement. We are trying to do different things. The service will still be there. We have KPIs, performance measures that we do for each department. So we are still going to measure the same thing, but for much cheaper cost. We are a small town, and not every department needs to be our own department. Sometimes it just works as a privatization of that function of that role.
And I'll also add in our subcommittee meeting, we also, I think that is there 1 or 2 cars that also are associated with animal control? 2. So there's also going to be a savings of two cars that are quite costly too. Now, also to Committeewoman Miggins, my dog Duke, who is getting up there in age, he does run away on occasion, or used to. Now he doesn't really, and our animal control people would actually know who he was and bring him back. So I do share your concern that we want to make sure that the service does what they say.
Well, I'll tell you what, I can see it. So it's now Lieutenant Tavares. Lieutenant Tavares found my little moped on the street in the middle of the night, saved her, brought her to the animal shelter. It's devastating. You wake up and your dog's gone out of your house. And he saved her, and we got her the next day within hours. But you think the worst, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important that if that does happen, that the animals are locals.
But we've checked, Mr. McDonald, we've checked on the references for the new service. They come well. Yeah,
Yeah,
well recommended.
yes, I've checked with the Animal Control Solutions Services, the city of Summit. They also, service Brook Township. I'm familiar with it.
Recording in progress.
Just see. Jesse. Yeah. This is good. So if you can mute that.
Martians are coming.
So a couple of things in here is this company that we're going with also does animal control with other towns. And the cars I've actually included when I say $300,000 to $400,000. That's the overall operating cost for the department, including not just restricted to their salaries and overheads. I'm talking about everything. So yeah, these are professional services that other towns use this to.
And the new service is costing us how much?
So, yeah, I just want to be clear. This contract is for a 6-month period to finish out the year, July 1st through December 31st. It's going to cost the township $15,300. We do have the option to extend the contract for a year. Certainly, I think that will come after evaluation of how that service goes. And to Committeeman Vinayak's point, measuring some KPIs and their performance throughout that 6 months. But yes, I have checked out their references. I have spoken to Summit, I've spoken to Brook, and the company has serviced them well.
I have a question. So I used to see Ralph Bass and the other gentleman driving around town. If somebody's dog got out, they were in town and available to start looking in the neighborhood. How is that going to happen now? Do we have, because they were there, they were located in our dispatch. So how is that going to work for somebody?
Yeah, so I think to a certain degree there will be a longer time period between call to patrol or to someone being out there. But I think as you've probably seen especially in this community, the power of Facebook actually at times works faster than sometimes getting somebody out on the road and looking for a particular animal. But yeah, I think you will see some time in between the call to somebody being here. Could also be that they're patrolling at Summit. They could be patrolling here. If they're patrolling in a nearby community, that could be far less. I think it's just it will be dependent.
And then follow up, if for some reason we're not pleased with the service, what happens to the 2 trucks and the 2 gentlemen we had doing the job? If we want to rehire, how is that going to happen?
They have been taken over in DPW. We had openings, so we had moved them over to a different department.
But they would be available to come back to animal control.
So,
we just have to be ready
yeah.
if the contract doesn't work to our liking.
Yeah, so I think you're always looking at when you're changing an operation, there is a transition period, and you want to be cognizant that there's always the possibility that service is brought back in-house if it's displeasing. But the 2 individuals who are currently the animal control officers are being absorbed into the Department of Public Works through attrition. We had openings there. We will encourage them, or at least one of them, to continue their training. And keep in mind that the Millburn Police Department is also required to have what's called a HELO, which is a special law enforcement officer for animal cruelty investigation. So all this contract, as well as the things that we already have in place with the township, we will be meeting our statutory obligation in providing animal control services.
Because it's not always about cost. It's also about services. I think that's really important to remember.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We don't want to lose service.
Absolutely.
May I have a motion to approve resolution 21-172?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Miggins,
No.
Ms. Iglo,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Wasserman,
Yes.
Mr. Vinayak,
Yes.
Mayor Prupus.
Yes.
Are there any comments from the committee or questions in regard to resolution 21-173, awarding contracts for crossing out services to all city management services?
I have a few questions. In receiving the resolution, I did not, in what's cited in the resolution and the scope of service is an exhibit E10 for a list of current crossing guards, daily hours and rates. I don't have that. I don't have that in my package.
I didn't get that either.
But I think that if we're voting on something, we should know what exhibit E10 was. And I don't think we should vote on this tonight. That's my opinion. I think some of the, there's also, in terms of the general posts, they talk about 33 posts, 1.5 hours, 90 minutes. At the end of the day, you have 33 posts, 1.5 hours in duration, starting at and ending at, there's no time, there's just a 9:30 written in there. So I don't feel that there's enough information here for us to vote on it. That's my opinion. I don't see a copy of a contract. I don't know if their jobs are guaranteed. I don't know if people are, if they're crossing guards in Millburn, but all of a sudden Westfield comes up short, so they shove them over to Westfield. I don't know if they're given this. I know that they're not given the same hours because I think the crossing guards today in the elementary school, I could talk about pre-COVID, they were 3.5 hours a day. This only calls for 3 hours a day in these, so the hours are changing, the money's changing. I just, do we have anything in writing? Are the people getting the same hourly pay? Why are we paying extra money? Because it looks like every time, you know, this town privatizes an awful lot of stuff. They privatize garbage. We don't know if there's really savings there. They privatize the 911. We don't know what kind of savings is there. We're privatizing animal control. We don't really know how well or not it's going to work. And we are a small little town. I don't know why we can't hire more guards. I don't think that just our guards are the only place. Everybody's having a hard time hiring. Anywhere you go, everywhere you go, and anywhere you go. I'll go into the. God, I went to get my hair done today. The woman who blew dry my hair washed my hair. That doesn't happen like that in Subway. It's very, you know, not like that. So, what happens if someone doesn't show up? Then you call the supervisor, but what if there's no one to cover it? Then does that mean our police have to go and cover it anyway? What are the numbers like in Westfield? How did that all work? Because everyone's talking about Westfield. How did we advertise for guards? How many times have we advertised? Where have we advertised? Have we asked the other guards? Do they know any people that want to? So these are all questions that I have. I'm vehemently opposed to moving this forward. And I think that's because we don't have the exhibits that are supposed to be in here, or a copy of the contract, that I don't know how we could possibly vote on something we don't have exhibits of. That's my opinion. Sorry.
Do you want me to? So first and foremost, I would have certainly been happy to address or answer any of these questions prior to tonight's meeting, so that we could have come forward with answers to this. But I have answers for many of those questions as well. The township first began speaking about the privatization of crossing guards last year. We attempted to go out to bid twice at that time. The first time, or actually, sorry, we went out to bid once. The bids were had to be rejected as a result of a noticing error. However, this conversation has been going on for much longer than that. We've been talking about the professionalization, the ability to fill crossing guard posts, the ability to free up police department time, and make sure that the safety of school-age children is put, in the hands of someone who is professionally manages crossing guards. They do this throughout the entire country, in large cities, small cities, in particular in New Jersey, Ridgewood, Wayne, Somerville, Westfield. All of them have privatized their crossing guards. I think some of the concerns were addressed. I remember having conversations with current crossing guards about whether they would be paid the same amount, whether they would be offered the same post, whether it would be offered a job. All of that has been included. I actually emailed the company again today, received confirmation of that in writing, and happy to share that with the committee. Again, part of the bid that was received by the township went into how they transition into a community. And part of that transition strategy is sort of overcoming this initial period in which people are fearful of that transition and the privatization of guards. I think one of the biggest advantages of this is that you get to keep the guards that you currently have, and they get to keep their job at the current rate. Many people speak to this, the cost of the contract. Part of that is as a result of that provision in the bid specifications. This has the support of the PTOC Safety Committee. As far as the exhibit, what's included in the packet is the provisions that will be inclusive of the contract. The resolution gives us the authority to enter into a contract with all city management, myself as a business administrator, and those provisions are placed into the contract. The exhibit was the document that had the names of every single crossing guard that are currently employed with the township of Millburn, the post that they serve at, and the dollar amount that they're currently making with the township, so that they knew as a company who they would be offering jobs to, what rate they would be offering the jobs to them, and what post they would be putting them at. So I think that the township has, again, and I'm not, but I've been asked to put this together. We've been asked to go out to bid. We authorized to go out to bid. We are here with a bid, with a responsive bid. And, I'm just providing some of those additional facts and information that I think you had questions on.
Still, it's another layer as far as I'm concerned, and it still doesn't talk about the fact that their hours are cut. And you have, yes, they work 3.5 hours, the 39 morning posts, 33 posts work 2 hours in the afternoon and an hour and a half in the morning. And this counts for 90 minutes and 90 minutes. 90 and 90 is 180 divided by 60 is 3 hours. So they're each cut half an hour. So that's 2.5 hours a week. And we're spending more with this company than if we just did the hiring ourselves with our own local people. I don't know. I feel like it's a whole nother layer. It's great that they keep the guards. I'd like to know what Westfield does. Did they keep the guards, or did they, can we go back 2 years or 3 years or 5 years? But more importantly, it wasn't all listed in here. And I just personally can't vote for something that I don't have all the information on.
Okay, Mayor Wiggins, we hear you, and Deputy Mayor Wasserman wants to speak.
Yeah, listen, I asked the crossing guards in the morning, and they are from the community. And we also want to, I also share your concern that the guards are, that we maintain our guards. I mean, Alex, can you assure us that the guards will maintain their positions, will maintain the amount of money that they make, the current guards? And can you also give us some background on why we even engaged this? I mean, didn't this go on for years, where we didn't have enough guards to cover intersections?
Yeah, so I can offer some background, and part of this is as a result of us not being able to hire guards. And I will point out that the Township of Millburn pays its crossing guards more than any other community that I've run into. We provide more hours to our crossing guards than any other community I've run into. In Westfield, if you work as a crossing guard, you make $18.25 an hour, and you work an hour and a half a day. Okay. So in Millburn, you make more than that, and you also work anywhere between 3.5 and 4.5 hours, depending on what post you have. In this contract, we actually added 2 additional posts, one at Essex Street, one at Millburn Avenue, so that we could pull cops back off of different posts and put them on the road. Part of the attractiveness of privatizing the crossing guard function is to get the traffic bureau out of managing crossing guards and back to being able to enforce rules, regulations, laws around the schools, and what we would consider an opportunity cost in what is lost when they have to manage crossing guards day in and day out. And that's not disparaging or saying anything about the crossing guards, it's just a function of what that department does. And if we have the ability to lessen that burden and put them in a function that is more conducive to what they do, I think that that's part of what was driving this initial conversation. Also, numerous conversations with the PTOC Safety Committee about their frustration over not being able to fill the crossing guard post, not having adequate communication between crossing guards and the traffic bureau. So I think all of these things lend itself to us looking at the ability to privatize, professionalize the crossing guards. And I would just keep in mind that this is a one-year contract. And so that, again, as we go through and we try to make changes and transition into different things, there's always the opportunity to pull back and be able to do it again in-house.
Okay. Committeewoman Eglo or Committeeman Benyaya, do you have any comments or questions on this matter before we can vote?
I just want to say that getting the letter of affirmation from PTOC meant a lot to make me understand their reasoning for that. They approve this, they're asking for this, and that meant a lot.
Chief Gilfetter also
Chief
sent
Gilfetter
a
had-
letter
yes.
approving this and requesting this as well.
Yes.
Committeeman Benyaya, do you have any?
So I'm actually, if we pay the cost per hour the same way, and it's a one-year contract as a test, I'm ready to support it, but I want to see that in the contract saying it, and I did not see that. I thought I saw 90 minutes and also 2 hours, not just 90 and 90.
Did you
I've
see
seen,
a contract? I haven't seen a contract.
I've actually seen, I've emailed him and I got the contract. So I read through that too, but I did not see hour to hour pay written in the contract, but I've gotten that confirmation in the email. So as a test and as what we have discussed, if they get paid the same way and they are going to be there. And I've also spoken to earlier mayor about this, and she was also telling me that she wanted to get this done because they always get complained about not having enough crossing guards. So I thought it was a positive thing, but we want to make sure the current crossing guard are there and they get paid the same way. That's all.
And the same hours.
So,
Same
okay,
out.
same hours, same pay. Okay. So may I have a motion to approve resolution 21-173?
Mayor, may I
Yes.
comment this? So if we can, like Committeewoman Megan said, maybe we can just see the contract one more time to make sure that the cost of per hour is there. It'll be much more easier to vote for it. If that is
Let's
a
ask
suggestion.
Mr. McDonald, if
Sure.
that is there any timing issue that this needs to be voted on tonight, or can it wait till the July?
I-
To still secure for the fall?
I don't think that there would be any issue in pushing this back to the July meeting. We do have in the specs that it runs from July 1st through June 30th. I don't know whether that would put us on the hook for paying for a portion of 15 days that we wouldn't necessarily be utilizing, but I don't foresee any issue. Yeah.
If we have to pay extra 15
Oh, yeah,
days.
so we're gonna push this to the next.
Sure.
If that's okay.
That's fine. So I would just like to say that we all got our packets last Thursday. I'd really like for all the committee members to take advantage of Mr. McDonald, to reach out to him, any questions that some of these answers and these conversations can happen prior to us sitting up here. So I just want to remind that we all have ample access to Mr. McDonald.
And it's my
all the
mistake
time.
on my part. I've actually gotten the contract, but I've not read the spec. There are always so many pages, and when someone asks this question, you really want to make sure you're fair. So I
Absolutely.
think it was a fair question asked.
Yes,
Because Mayor
absolutely.
Proof is this week's pages was over 200. Just so you know.
Okay, absolutely. So we will talk about it at the next, with consent of everyone here. We will carry this to the next meeting, which is July 13th.
Thank you for the consideration, Mayor.
Thanks. Okay. Moving on to resolution 21-184, confirming permitting the display of fireworks at Canoe Brook Country Club. Are there any comments from the committee in regards to resolution 21-184?
We do this every year, I believe.
Every year?
Don't we?
I think there was maybe an extension, perhaps? Is that why we put it separately?
Any other questions?
No question.
May I have a motion to approve resolution 21-184?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
A roll call vote, please.
Ms. Miggins,
Abstain?
Ms. Del Eglo,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Wasserman,
Yes.
Mr. Banayak,
Yes.
Mayor Purpose.
Yes.
Thank you.
Resolution 21-186, authorizing person-to-person of plenary retail distribution liquor license. Are there any comments from the committee in regards to resolution 21-186? May I have a motion to approve resolution 21-186? Motion. May I have a second?
Second.
A roll call vote, please.
Ms. Miggins,
Yes.
Ms. Del Eglo,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Wasserman,
Yes.
Mr. Banayak,
Yes.
Mayor Purpose.
Yes.
Thank you.
Before we move on to our second readings tonight, just want to read an announcement that we will consider several ordinances on second reading tonight. There will be a public hearing for each of these ordinances. Once the public hearing is open, members of the public who wish to participate in the public hearing will be asked to the lectern or invited to speak on Zoom. Each member of the public will be allotted 1 3-minute time period. Member of the public cannot yield their time to another. Comments and questions will be strictly limited to the ordinance for which the public hearing has been called. If comments stray from the subject matter, you will be asked to refocus your comments. If comments continue to be off topic, you will be asked to conclude your comments. Once a member of the public has finished speaking and has been seated or speaking permission removed from Zoom, the township committee staff and/or professionals may address any pertinent questions or comments. It is strongly encouraged that speakers do not repeat what others have previously said. We want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to be heard. Repeating what has already been stated may keep others from being heard and engaging in the public hearing process. Please keep your comments and questions to items not yet heard by the committee. And just one more reminder that each public comment is 3 minutes long, and then you will be asked to wrap it up and conclude your comment. Okay. Deputy Mayor Wasserman.
Thank you, Mayor. I present for consideration an ordinance entitled Ordinance 2577-21, ordinance amending and supplementing the Township of Millburn Development Regulations and Zoning Ordinance. I think we
I
have.
need to recuse.
Go on. Why don't you?
I have to recuse, so I'm going to recuse. But I'm going to turn the TV. We're done. Better?
Okay, let's continue.
Okay, thank you. I think we have Mr. Phillips on the line to give a professional review of what we're doing. Paul, do you hear me?
Yes, I can, Richard. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear. Can you just give an overview of ordinance 2077-21?
Yes, I'd be happy to provide some context.
Paul,
and-
Paul, please hold on for 1 second. Mr. Falcon's trying to
Okay, I'm
speak to
sorry.
Mr. Wasserman.
Okay, I didn't open the hearing. Tonight is the time set for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in explanation with the law. I declare the hearing open. Okay, Paul, go ahead.
Are we set?
We're set.
Great. So I'll provide a bit of context and history here. So with this ordinance, the administration is seeking to move forward with some zoning amendments that are intended to basically do two things. One is to respond to some concerns that have been raised regarding the current zoning needing to be more business friendly. And secondly, to put Millburn's business districts in a more competitive position in terms of attracting the types of businesses that are likely to locate in a downtown setting as we go forward. I would also just point out that a number of the recommendations that are part of this ordinance were either echoed or actually advanced by Perkins Eastman as part of the downtown vision study. So I was basically given the directive by the Township Committee to draft this ordinance. And I did this also with Alex McDonald's assistance. So just briefly, let me summarize what's in it. First, there's a change to the downtown parking requirement. That would be for the B4 district. And roughly about 10 years ago, the downtown parking standard was amended to add a waiver requirement, which meant that no development application was required for any change in use that did not trigger an increase in the off-street parking requirement. And that would be notwithstanding the fact that the application did not comport with the underlying parking requirements. The problem that's been experienced over the last 10 years is that with certain changes of use that increase the off-street parking requirement, for example, going from straight retail to restaurant, businesses have had to apply to the reviewing board to seek relief. And also the board has typically required these businesses to seek municipal parking permits. And as you are well aware, this process is expensive for applicants, in many cases, prospective new businesses to Millburn, and it really discourages such businesses from pursuing an application in the township. So the intent of this ordinance is to basically eliminate that current trigger provision as part of the downtown parking waiver, so that there would be no additional parking required in the B4 zone for any change of occupancy or use, so long as it does not involve an expansion of the building. So that's the first change. The second change is there is an expansion of the list of permitted uses in the business zones, and specifically the B4 zone. So as you might recall, back in 2019, we added some additional permitted uses, instructional schools and studios, showrooms, galleries, I think educational play centers. So the intent now is to include additional uses, including things such as brew pubs, theaters, museums, co-working space, which is basically shared office space, and also for certain uses to allow on the ground floor, particularly insurance brokers. The ordinance currently allows financial institutions and real estate offices on the ground floor, so that's being expanded. And then lastly, there are modifications governing restaurants as a use. So right now, the zoning allows restaurants, and by there's an outright prohibition on any restaurants with a drive-through. Drive-throughs are not permitted, but restaurants are permitted as a conditional use in B2, B3, and B4, which is all the business districts other than the mall at Short Hills. And the single condition is that the closest part of the structure be at least 125 feet from the nearest lot line of a single family dwelling in a residential district. So if that condition is not met, the applicant needs to go to the zoning board for what's known as a D3 variance approval. But this is not what the issue or the problem has been. The problem is that even if a restaurant is more than 125 feet from the nearest residential property line, because it is still only permitted under the current ordinance as a conditional use, based on the mandates of the municipal land use statute, a restaurant user must initially file an application with the planning board. So even though it complies with the standard, a prospective new restaurant owner must still spend the time and money and effort to make an application to the planning board. So the solution that is being proposed is to change the zoning so that a restaurant that meets the 125-foot separation standard becomes a permitted principal use, which would eliminate any need to go to the planning board if the application is otherwise site plan exempt. At the same time, the ordinance would designate only those restaurants that do not meet the 125-foot separation standard as a conditional use. And this ordinance further provides for specific conditional use standards. There's, I think, a half a dozen in there. And they are designed to afford maximum protection to adjacent residences in those instances. The problem with the existing ordinance, there's no standards other than the 125 feet. So this beefs up those conditional use standards. If the conditions are met, the applicant need not go to the zoning board. Just to summarize on the issue of the restaurants, and I know it's a bit complicated, but the proposed ordinance is maintaining the 125-foot separation requirement as a basis to distinguish permitted and conditionally permitted restaurant uses. And it again is adding these roughly half a dozen specific standards that restaurants must meet to avoid going to the zoning board. If they do not meet the 125-foot standard, they have to go to the zoning board. And again, they are designed to afford protection to adjacent residents. And if those standards, if the 125-foot standard is not met, and also one or more of those specific conditions are not met, the burden is on the applicant to essentially convince the zoning board that the use should still be approved, notwithstanding that there's non-compliance with one or more of the standards. And let me just close by saying something. I think it's important for the township committee and the public to hear this, that I've been doing this for a lot of years. And I will tell you that I don't know of any other municipality or any other downtown district that regulates restaurants other than those with drive-throughs because of the intensity and the potential for 24-hour operations. I don't know any other municipality that regulates restaurants as a conditional use. And in fact, one of the recommendations of the Perkins Eastman Downtown Vision Plan was to make restaurants a principal permitted use, as their conclusion was that they see restaurants as a major driver contributing to the future health of downtown Millburn, if not, Millburn business districts generally. So, and again, what they would suggest is no different than what is accepted zoning practice throughout the state. So for the township committee to basically keep that 125-foot standard, it really is going the extra mile in an effort to afford those protections to adjacent residents. So that gives you a kind of a summary of what is in the ordinance. And I would be happy to come back after public comment and address any issues that the township committee might have. So thank you.
Thank you. So we're now going to open up for public hearing, and just want to remind everyone that you can come and make your statement, give your comments, ask your questions, but it's not a dialogue, so no one's going to respond to you until after you sit down. And then at the end of the public comment period, we have our professionals who will be able to respond to any pertinent questions. That being said, please come and state your name and your address.
Hello, I'm Patricia Morielli, 1 Claremont Drive, Short Hills. I'm here to voice my strong opposition to the proposed ordinance. Spent a lot of time in downtown Millburn. Recently, I took notes on what I saw was happening from a business perspective. Keep in mind that the COVID restrictions were just lifted a couple of short weeks ago. Along Millburn Avenue, Pure Bar and Cycle Bar are moving in, with Pure Bar relocating for space. Unwind is moving to a larger space. Live Breads is expanding to the Live Warehouse. Shayla has moved from one space to another across the street. Kung Fu Tea moved from one spot to another. Gong Chow came into town, taking the space of Kung Fu Tea. Springbone Kitchen is coming to town. Elephant Plate is moving into town as well. On Upper Millburn Avenue, at least 3 new businesses have arrived: Bagel Pantry, Lobster Shack, and Taste Buddy. Building permits for these new space build-outs were issued this spring by Millburn Township. On Morris Turnpike, AFC Urgent Care is open for business. In the mall, Ruth Chris Steakhouse is opening soon. It's clear that businesses are returning at a rapid pace, with 5 merchants moving to new spaces in our business district to expand or get more favorable lease terms, and 9 merchants coming to town, all but 2 offering food or drink. That's 14 businesses, a third of them expanding or moving, and 2/3, 66%, new to town. It's also clear that restaurants in Millburn are open for business and thriving despite the so-called burdensome restrictions on businesses in Millburn, which were cited as a primary reason for Ordinance 2577 was put forward. Just walk down Millburn Street any weekend and you can see tables full of patrons. Very well done, Town Council. Try to get a reservation at Common Lot for Friday night. You can't. Wait for a table at Fiamma. You'll wait. Or get in line for the Godfather at the Millburn Deli. Business is so active, additional police are being detailed to our business district to keep things running smoothly. There has always been a path for restaurants that want to open in our town while considering the concerns of residents. It's called a zoning board review. And while many restaurants have successfully opened and thrived since the adoption in '93 of the current ordinance, we ask that you keep it. The current ordinance is not a barrier to commercial success. There are a host of reasons why businesses may or may not move to town. Let's fix the cause of the problem, not the symptom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jay Morielli, 1 Claremont Drive. I'd like to start first by addressing Mr. Phillips' comment that the requirements are actually getting stronger. Question to Mr. Phillips or anyone: will a D3 variance still be required for restaurants that are within 125 feet? It is my understanding that it only will be required that the planning board approve the conditions as they're laid out, that a variance will not be required. And if a restaurant meets the ordinance requirements, they will not be required to go before the zoning board. Our concerns remain the same. No residential impact was performed. We've not received an answer as to why. No resident input was solicited. And despite concerns now raised by over 70 residents, not a single word has changed in the proposed ordinance. The township, in my opinion, and that of a professional planner, Peter Stack, in a report we had commissioned, believes that the FAQs provided are factually incorrect and misleading. It is very critical that the TC step back now and take the time to truly understand this radical change to the township zoning regulations. And it's equally important that any township committee members that are impacted by the zoning ordinance recuse. It is appropriate for any township committee member that owns, rents, or leases commercial property in the B2, B3, or B4 districts to recuse, as their businesses depend on maintaining good relations with the commercial property landlords that will benefit if this ordinance is passed. Mr. Benayak made an impassioned statement at the last township committee meeting, saying that if there were 100 residents saying something, quote, I will sit down and listen and change my thought process or make them think in the same way or agree to disagree. Well, we have 70 residents now, Mr. Benayak, saying something. Please, all we are asking is that you do what you said you would do. Sit down with us, discuss the impacts, have a dialogue, and then we could move forward. Thank you.
evening. Elaine Becker, 257 Brookhaven Way. When this ordinance is currently structured was added to the business districts, the Township Committee obviously recognized that some residents were disadvantaged by restaurants that operated closer, probably closer than the 125 feet, to the nearby homes. The frequently asked questions explain just as Mr. Phillips has said, the town needs to remain competitive. There are vacancies, commercial property values are falling a bit, need to be more business friendly. The first step in revitalizing Millburn is to make restaurants a permitted use. Certain protections for residents remain and certain conditions mitigate the impact of the new business. These points hardly seem to be compelling or even related to some sort of solution of what's happening downtown. I really just think it has absolutely nothing to do with this particular ordinance, except a few restaurants that maybe couldn't fit in. And I'd like to know, has there been any study of how the current ordinance has worked in the past many years? I've been on the planning board for 13 years since this was put in, and I don't remember ever, not that my memory is that good, but I still don't remember any plan that came to, any application, I should say, that came to the planning board because of the 125 feet. Has it been so onerous that restaurants have left town? The planner, when he spoke to the planning board, seemed quite concerned that a restaurant that applies and has to deal with a 125-foot ordinance and has to go to the planning board, it takes time and it costs money to do so. But that's the cost of doing business as far as I'm concerned. So to me, the bottom line is that the residents who have had this protection for 28 years deserve to keep it. A house can't move, but a business can. Thank you.
Does anybody else like to make a comment? Is there anybody on?
Good evening, Pat Driscoll, 20 Main Street, Millburn. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for your time and effort. So one of the things that I'm a little disappointed is that this ordinance is not bifurcated because the parking is a serious issue. And I think that's something that the Township Committee needs to get taken care of, because there are some uses that can come into a space that are going to have to go in front of the planning board that really shouldn't have to go in front of the planning board. As far as the restaurant goes, being that I'm a real estate broker, I will tell you that I hear all the time, I don't want to go to Millburn. I got to go in front of the planning board. I'll go to Summit. I'll pay a little bit more per square foot as opposed to go and spend $25,000 to go in front of the planning board. So these other towns have CZOs, which is a continuation of zoning occupancy. As long as they follow all the regulations, they can open up their business. So I think that it would be beneficial. And to this woman's point here, I don't get that many phone calls for people that want to come into Millburn. I do get phone calls, but it's a little bit problematic to get people into space. So for whatever that's worth, please take it. I think it would be a good thing to make the process as easy as possible to get people into spaces. There are still a lot of vacant spaces in downtown Millburn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patrice.
Can Jesse take some? We're going to take some and come back to the room. We're going to do some.
Mike Shepard, 7 Canterbury Lane. I want to express my continued opposition to Ordinance 2577-21 and relaxing the 125-foot restriction on restaurants. I know I spoke at the last meeting and we had some 50-odd concerned residents signing the petition. As Mr. Moriel mentioned, we now have 70 plus concerned residents and counting that have signed. These are 70 people who are deeply concerned, as I am, and asking this committee not to move forward on this ordinance tonight. This is a very diverse group of folks. Some of the folks on that are folks who've been here for 20, 30 years, whose kids have moved out. Others like mine are, families with young kids. And we are all deeply concerned and are asking this committee to listen to our collective voices. Just to reiterate what Mr. Morial said, I think the petition ask is pretty modest. It's to put a pause to this, meet with the residents, and do an independent resident impact assessment before moving forward. In all three of the committee meetings I've been to now, I've heard this phrase struck a balance. I obviously respectfully disagree with that. I think this ordinance will cause real harm to my family's quality of life and my property value, as well as those of my neighbors. I would offer to this group to consider that if you do in fact believe that there is balance in this ordinance, then it should be a welcome step to bring in an outside party to do a resident impact analysis. It will validate whatever assumptions there are around that balance. And if not, it will allow us to collectively strengthen to address the residents' concerns that are articulated tonight and articulated via the petition. So I would just implore, again, the group to listen to the concerned residents and vote against this ordinance tonight. Thank you for listening.
Hi, this is Anne Marie Shepherd, 7 Canterbury Lane. I also wanted to express my concern about the restaurant ordinance. I mean, basically our property is very close to the commercial property behind us. Our backyard is really small. There are parking spots directly adjacent to our fence. And so when we're in our bedrooms, we can hear people speaking at just a normal volume, which is manageable during the day. But then the possibility of a restaurant, particularly a restaurant that's potentially serving alcohol, occupying this space, it's concerning to us. We have 2 young kids, 7 years old and 3. We're expecting a 3rd kid in September. The kids go to bed early. Just restaurants, particularly the concern that they'll stay up late and people will be drinking. I think it's really gonna affect our quality of life. And so just wanted to share my concern and ask that you consider this impact on residents like myself, as well as the many neighbors who are in similar situations.
Thank you.
Good evening, Township Committee. Ron and Liza DeBliss here at 10 Raleigh Place. Again, I think we support the ordinance being turned down this evening. One of the reasons we've coexisted here on Raleigh Place since 1992, and it's been a great ecosystem, and we've enjoyed the benefits of all the surrounding businesses and being able to walk to and fro during our time here, and we hope that continues. Removing this protection is something that we are vehemently against and would recommend you vote no to, particularly using the street as almost a excuse that if we live across the street or there's a street in between our property and a commercial property, that it doesn't count. So I'd like the planner to discuss that if possible. But utilizing, and even the parking lot, I think, is excluded as well. And that's something that, again, the properties around Raleigh, or Upper South Mountain, as I call it, surround a parking lot, and it seems that their rights are being taken away as well. So overall, we've enjoyed this protection since we moved in 1992. We hope that continues, and we certainly look forward to continuing our support of the local downtown businesses as we have. Thank you for your consideration.
Mr. Steck, can you?
Oh, can I be heard?
We can hear you now, yes.
Oh, thank you. My name is Peter Steck. I'm a planning consultant. A memo was delivered, I believe, to the board, and I just want to take a couple minutes to talk about some of the more technical aspects of my comments on Ordinance 2577-21. First of all, the municipal land use law requires that conditional use standards be specific so that the applicant knows in advance whether he or she can comply with it. When I look at your standard on air handling equipment, in my opinion, it doesn't meet that standard. It says that odors are to be minimized. I don't know what that means. I suppose from 100% to 95% is minimized, but that's a standard that not only is vague, but it obviously depends upon continued maintenance of the equipment. And that is not really addressed in the ordinance. There is a radical change that's being wrought by this ordinance. And one of the cautionary notes is that there are some restaurants that may have gotten variances in the past. Let's say they were 125 feet, within 125 feet of a residential property line, but it was across the street. When you pass this ordinance, that exampled restaurant that may have had conditions imposed by the Board of Adjustment will now become a permitted use. And that really means that the conditions that might have been imposed in the past will vaporize. That's a cautionary note because you can't go back. Once you pass this ordinance and make those variance granted restaurants by the Board of Adjustment, once you make them a permitted use, you can change the ordinance a second time, but the answer is, in my opinion, any conditions that have been posed in the past will simply no longer be effective. That is a concern because I don't think anyone has really analyzed that. There are other issues in the conditions for restaurants that are concerning. There's an issue of light stanchions. As I read it, I don't know if the light stanchion can be in the buffer area, or is it the light throw that's in the buffer area? The ordinance is not clear. As I looked at the different zones that this applies to,
Mr. Steck, you have 2 seconds left.
they're widely different impacts. There's also missing information. The ordinance refers to the 2008 master plan circulation element.
They've allowed it 3 minutes, so thank you very much for your comment, and now you're past the 3 minutes. So thank you very much for your comment. Excuse me, can you please stop interrupting the meeting? Okay, right now you're interrupting the meeting, Mayor Becker. Thank you, Mayor Becker. No, excuse me, okay. All right. Mr. Officer, hello, please, can you please assist? So right now the meeting is being disrupted. This is the second time, so now can you please help this lady remove, because we are in recess. Please, Dominique, Ms. Russo. Take Mr. Mandelbaum.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, my name is Kenneth Mandelbaum, 15 Bleecker Street. First, I'd like to applaud the board for taking this initiative. There's a tremendous need as the times have changed We have more vacancies than we've ever had in town. It's not just because of COVID. It's because of the world is changing in terms of what retail is viable today versus what retail was viable 5 years ago or even 10 years ago. The need for restaurants to revive a downtown is paramount. As our professionals pointed out by Mr. Phillips, we are a unique town in being so restrictive than any other town in New Jersey. In addition to which, we should not minimize the fact that for an extra $20,000 and not knowing if you're going to get approved, why do tenants want to come into town when they can go into Summit, they can go into Montclair, they can go into Morristown, and there's always a need for good restaurants in town. And we're just not talking about restaurants, we're talking about other types of retail in this ordinance as well. I think the need as a professional, and I've had clients that have not have decided to come into town because the burden was so great, and they went to other towns. We have a tremendous need to keep this town viable, productive, and look to the future to where retail is going, and especially the growth of restaurants and food establishments. And I again applaud the board for taking on the responsibility to make this happen.
Thank you. Let me just reiterate that everybody gets 3 minutes for public comment during the open hearing. So please be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you. Is there anybody else in the room that would like to make a comment?
Good evening, William Wallaby, 46 Maple Street in Millburn. First, I would like to say that was great information that I didn't get his name that he was giving all of us. And I would have loved to listen and educate myself and educate the public. You know, I know that you have 3 minutes allotted time, but you can make exception. This is like you're running a tight ship here. You're not letting anyone speak.
Mrs. Ovalbi, please keep your focus to the ordinance. Thank you very much.
Tara, just give me a moment. I still have my minutes.
You do, but
Yes.
please
So,
go back to focus.
Yeah, you can't focus me. I'm not mechanical, okay? I'm human. So let me just speak. So you made a comment that no one should repeat what others have said. I have drafted this before coming to this meeting, so it will be a repetition. Just listen, if you can. I'm speaking regarding Ordinance 2577-21. I don't see a reason why Township Committee is in a rush in voting for this ordinance. I took time out to visit the area. I don't know if any one of you have done that. I actually visited the areas that will be impacted and listened to the residents. The residents who are in tune asked for an impact study on residential property values. Residents wants to know the impact this will have on their property values because this has not been done by the Township Committee prior to putting forward this ordinance. In addition, there are conflicted board members whose homes or businesses are within the 200 feet of the area that will be impacted by this ordinance. I'll suggest they recuse themselves and this process needs to start all over again. So I am asking you that your residents that voted you in are asking for this ordinance to be turned down. And I will hope that you guys will do the right thing tonight. Thank you.
Anybody else in the room would like to? Yes.
Hi, David Honeysett, 92 Meadowbrook Road. I've been a resident since 2007. My property abuts one of these B2, B3 districts. We've had consistent problems with commercial property owners in this area. It's twofold. Property owners are disrespectful. They're not good neighbors. They don't maintain their properties. They're loud. They're odorous. And then the second part of that is that the enforcement is completely lax. There's no transparency about the enforcement. There's no transparency about fines. In this township where you're late to get your dog license, you're fined. But commercial property owners are not. We don't know what they're fined, what happens. There's absolutely no resolution. The property directly behind my house was a suspicious fire that sat vacant for 10 years with festering conditions of water and vermin before it was finally rectified. Tilly's operated for 4 years in the McConey space without seeking a variance at all. The landlord that owned that building allowed them to put hundreds of thousands of dollars to install a commercial kitchen, which was far exceeded the Glenwood Diner, which previously sat there. Tilly's closed, now Bocconi is in there. Bocconi has operated for over a year with no variance. So to me, it seems like these landlords are just circumventing the whole process of applying for a variance anyways. And this ordinance that you're proposing will just help them to do that. They will not need to seek it anymore. These people are not good neighbors. There's zero oversight. Let me just state unequivocally, I'm not opposed to retail. I'm opposed to restaurants. Restaurants are very hard to manage, especially when your enforcement does not manage them at all. Residents are aware of zoning when they purchase homes. They insist on reading the zoning when they purchase homes to protect their property values. Commercial property owners are also aware of the zoning and the variances necessary for their buildings. And they are skirting the legal requirements and allowing restaurants to occupy their properties without seeking variances, and everybody just goes along. With zero enforcement, how can residents trust in township officials to protect the residents? They cannot. I request a survey to assess resident impact.
Does anybody else in the room would like to speak?
My name is Ted Prue, 3 Claremont Drive. I want to echo what my neighbors have said in objection to this ordinance. 70 residents from different areas of Millburn have expressed concerns, and they represent more kids and family members that could be impacted by this. It's a little worrisome that some of us never received official notification of this ordinance and had to learn it from neighbors. It's also worrisome that the petition of the residents have never been addressed in the form of either a residential impact study or changes to the ordinance itself. The ordinance conflicts with the stated goals of the township master plan, which states the goals to coordinate and interpret appropriate land use that will promote the character of the township as a small suburb of the highest quality, and that will preserve the quality of life that makes the community desirable, and to protect the character of established neighborhoods. During a previous meeting, the township committee have said we are all neighbors. I would urge the committee to listen to and address the neighbor residents' concern and represent their interests rather than force pass a proposal that have negative impact on the community. Again, I want to reiterate the request from the residents, which is to conduct a residential impact study before this ordinance is further processed. Thank you.
Anybody else in the room would like to make a public comment? We can act.
Jean Pasternak, 342 Hobart Avenue. I had tried to get these emails screen shared, but I guess it was impossible to do so. So I'm going to read from them. On the 18th of June of 2020, this was written by Bruce Jeffrey, a fellow commercial property owner, like some of the others who spoke here. Thank you, everyone, for being accommodating and allowing a tenant to proceed with this restaurant opening after being shut down for 3 months. He will most definitely apply for any and all permits required for facade signage and changing in the name from Tilly's to Bocconi South. He might wait till township approves and memorializes the change in zoning this August, September 2020 to expedite his cause versus spending $5,000 and hiring an attorney to appear before the township for site plan. Tenant also recommended Board of Health approval. Tenant will apply for sidewalk permits. As LL, we furnished a township an insurance certificate naming township as additional insured. Again, thank you for your cooperation in these most difficult and challenging of times. As we all know, this restaurant has been operating for a year without proper permitting. It was issued a food safety certificate illegally, and this has not been addressed. And I totally concur with what was said. That's an example of exactly how there's no enforcement. Mr. McDonald, you acknowledged that. You made a statement in May 4th meeting saying exactly this. It was all done illegally. You acknowledged it, and you know that they have to go before the zoning board, and they now are, but they've been allowed to operate for a year. So what confidence does that give these residents, our community, that any of this stuff will be ever enforced? Secondly, there was some stuff that was written by Lisa Reppert, an attorney representing one of the citizens that lives and it will be impacted by this. She was replied to by Kit Falcon, and there were some statements made in there. I understand that application has been made to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for conditional use approval. It wasn't true. So we even have our attorney, who hasn't signed this ordinance, as far as I understand, replying to a fellow attorney something that was not true. That's very concerning. Another thing that I'd like to point out is that there were conflicts of interest on the first read. I know Ms. Miggins has left the room for this, but she was here for the first read. Doesn't that mean that the process needs to restart? Also, as people have pointed out, there are restaurants opening. They're acting like this thing's already been adopted. There's food safety approvals being issued, et cetera. Bacone, Lobster Shack, Elephant Plate, et cetera, et cetera. That's ridiculous. I understand that Mr. McDonald met with one of the people in this room and admitted that Millburn has always been lax with residents and businesses on zoning enforcement. We have one officer for thousands of properties. How can you say this out of one side of your mouth and then go ahead and be in support of an ordinance that you helped write along with the planner? I mean, just address it. I mean, it's just misleading, okay? That's it. That's right.
Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Feld, live in Alexander Lane, Short Hills, New Jersey. At the beginning, we heard that we need to be business friendly. But did you take into account the additional cost that this board has imposed? The city assessment, 5-cent bag fee. Yesterday I went to the mall. I didn't know I had to pay 5 cents to get a bag at Macy's. And later tonight, you're going to be approving the utility shifting. My daughter moved to Seattle. The cost of getting this green power is an additional cost to the businesses. I would heed what was said at the zoning board by the chairman, Mr. Steinberg. And he cautioned people who are not attorneys to stop practicing practice of law. We heard earlier tonight that 2 non-attorneys drafted this ordinance. This ordinance does not bear the good housekeeping signature like other towns by your municipal attorney as to the form, content, and legality. I too agree as to the lack of enforcement. When you look at this ordinance, putting aside the parking issue where other people have greater knowledge about it, the real issue is the people within the 125-foot buffer. What protections do they have? What enforcements will they have? I can tell you prior to this meeting at 6 o'clock, I attended the health board meeting. You hear about KPIs. How many permits were issued for restaurants? How many of those restaurants applied with the existing law that we have today? That is the issue. You can't not enforce the law. As to the way this ordinance is drafted, there are differences between zoning ordinances and police powers. I think everyone is happy and maybe want more stringent of the police powers, but they have to be enforced, whether it's the odors, the rodents, the noise. If you look at what's happened here, it seems that there's been ordinances adopted, such as noise that we'll hear later, rodent, that's responding to the comments of the public. It should have been done as a consistent, uniform policy. I too agree it's time to take a time out and let the planner that spoke that you cut off and say, how do we draft this, make the zoning part separate, the parking part separate, and protect the people within the 125-foot buffer.
Does anybody else in the room want want to speak? Does anybody else in the room want to speak? Oh, okay, great, and then we'll be done, I think. No one else wants to speak.
Hi there, my name's Harold Pollock. I have a property, my down practice is on the corner of Rowley Place and Millburn Avenue. I grew up in Millburn. My father practiced there, built a house in 51, and I'm practicing there now. A lot of changes have happened in Rowley Place in the last few years. Parking has been taken away from one side of the street, and now we have it on the other side. If a restaurant comes in to someplace like Jose Iber, there won't be any parking for my clients, for the residents that live on that street, for anyone. It will be a total mess. So I am against the ordinance 2577-21. Also, there will be significant noise from a restaurant either there or across the street, if it has outdoor seating, as well as other problems. One solution may be for those properties bordering B4 is to have an amendment inside of it saying, such as for our area, that it does not apply to the area east of Whittingham to South Mountain Road. That means that no restaurants can open in the buildings between the post office and Rowley Place, and then down further across the street on Millburn Avenue where B4 is also part of the zoning. I'm very, very concerned that will affect my practice adversely, very adversely. Thank you.
Looks like it for Zoom. Does anybody else in the room want to speak?
Nancy Stone, 266 Essex Street, Millburn, New Jersey. I want to address Friday night, David and I decided to have a date night in Millburn. So I called the Soothing Zen spot because I wanted to get massages, and unfortunately they're under new ownership and they have no help. Help is a big problem in this town. We went to Standard. There was literally a 50-minute wait to wait there. We went to Basilico. There was a wait there, and ended up getting a place in Summit. We both got great massages, and ended up eating at Blossom at about 8:30, 9 o'clock. We got sushi there. I always pick Millburn first, always, for whatever we want to go. Sunday, I ate dinner at Enzo's with my grandson who had a sleepover, and we had a wonderful meal there. I look at the properties across the street and I think about all the tenants all the residents that live behind there. I run my business customers first. Your customers are the vital component of any business. Why you would jeopardize a customer for your own selfish reasons, and I'm calling Kenny Mandelbaum on that out, for him to get up and complain about the restaurant ordinance. All the restaurants have the opportunity to go to the zoning ordinance and get their variance legally and appropriately. We all had that opportunity. I'm sure you had to do that yourself. Why we are changing something that is to the benefit of your customer base, which are the residents of Millburn, is absolutely appalling that you would not defend the constituency of this town. I, as a business owner, agree there has to be modifications, but that's a conversation that you are not allowing, that you do not embrace, that you do not give the opportunity to the residents to engage in that conversation, and to make a blanket ordinance written by non-professionals is really a disgrace to the representation of what you're trying to project in this town. I want to applaud Maggie for recusing herself. You should be recusing yourself, being having a business in this town, and leave it for these three to decide what the future of that ordinance should be, which is the customers, your customers.
One last time, is there anybody else in the room that wants to make a comment?
Hi, my name is Mayak Saraswat. I'm resident of 68 Meadowbrook Road, and I prepared the whole thing to say it, but again, I'm just saying the same thing over and over again. So just want to say I oppose this ordinance, and we should do more like impact analysis and what steps are we taking to enforce and monitoring the violations. And I think what considerations should have been made about like other issues like safety of neighborhood, garbage disposal, noise, chemical waste, etc. So I oppose this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. One more person on Zoom. Okay.
Hi, my name is Sanjay Agrawal. I live in 9 Birchwood Drive. As echoed by my neighborhood colleagues, I oppose to this ordinance and request the township to do the impact analysis as requested by my colleagues here so far. Thank you.
Thank you. There's one more.
Hi, this is Monisha Amaral from 124 Shortles Avenue. I also oppose this ordinance. I think there will be an increase in noise, traffic, crime, and several other issues as a lot of the residents have highlighted. I was wondering, since there's a huge push to increase revenue from the business owners, if there's any feasibility study or any investigation done on some of these rental properties and reassessing and maybe looking at getting increased tax revenues from some of these properties that have recently come up. That might be a better way to increase our revenues versus from some of these commercial properties, and certainly not from the Glenwood section, which has predominantly been low crime and very safe for our children. It is also one of the few sections that is very close to the school. If you look at the distance between the Millburn Avenue and the Glenwood school, it's not very far. And if you open it up to a lot of these restaurants, you do not know who's coming and going from these places. We've already had an increase in crime, in car theft in Deerfield and Hartshorn. The last thing we want is to have the same issues in Glenwood. I would propose, investigating other ways of increasing revenues definitely from some of these affordable housing properties versus from commercial properties. Thank you.
Hi, Carrie Heller, Courtyard 343 Millburn Avenue, 56 Byron Road is my home. I didn't intend to speak, but listening a little bit on the condition of the town, the downtown, Morris Turnpike, Upper Millburn Avenue. People look at things at a particular moment in time. I'm here 30 years. When I bought the Courtyard 30 years ago, I was saving the downtown. I didn't know the downtown was dying at the time. We're hurting. To think that there are new businesses coming in, there are more businesses coming in. There's also more businesses leaving. I have 2 more coming in. The town is very transient, and that's the issue with what you're addressing on the restaurant change. And to compliment Paul, Mr. Phillips, I have downtown properties in Montclair, Bloomfield, Glenridge, Maplewood, South Orange, done business in Livingston. To the best of my knowledge, what Paul has quoted with reference to the ordinance change is what is done in other towns. These are just where I do business. Other towns that I've looked to do business, I've seen the same change. I'm very sensitive to those in the B3 district of 150 125 feet. It's not so different from what it's been. It needs to be looked at in the future under the conditional uses, and we're going to protect them. If I were to live there, if I were to move there, I would look to make sure that I'm protected. I'd like to ask one thing of the board, and if Paul, Mr. Phillips would consider, and to look at 607.4. It's been rumored, I may or may not be buying the Charlie Brown's building. There are lots of people still working on the purchase of that building. The way the ordinance is written, Paul, the last part of 607.4, if you were to put a period at the end of spaces on the last sentence, what this paragraph is doing is, whether it's Charlie Brown's, there's a few other properties in the town, it's not allowing the parking to be removed from a building. So if Charlie Brown's was not to become a restaurant, you can't remove the parking spaces. The Perkins Eastman report suggests that the parking lot be a fill-in, which it should be. It's been for 30 years we've discussed that that parking lot is an interruption of the streetscape. What the ordinance does create now is we have some buildings in downtown that are as many as 6,000 square feet that can become a restaurant. They might have 100 parking spaces. On the other hand, a Charlie Brown's or Jim Wiles building may become something else in the future, and those parking lots can't be taken away. What this last portion of this paragraph says is that forever and ever, without coming in front of, and I don't know if it's a double change, it's removal of parking spaces, and then to go build a new building, again, to not have parking spaces. There's a double effect of this portion of the ordinance. I would just like for you to consider it. I don't think it's a major change. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a few more. We're going to hear everybody.
Hi, my name is Avni. I live on 16 Meadowbrook Road. I also oppose this ordinance, and I've been living in the Glenwood section for many years, and I see a lot of kids playing around, and it's a very safe place. It's a very quiet neighborhood, and allowing this ordinance will create a lot of ruckus in the neighborhood, and what kind of social elements and everything. Unsocial elements are going to come because the restaurants will stay open late at night, or if drive-throughs are allowed, what kind of smells and everything. And Millburn and Short Hills prides in itself in a very safe neighborhood, a very residential friendly neighborhood, very children friendly. So we need to keep that. So I oppose this ordinance, and I agree with everyone else that we need to do a township impact study. So I think that should be done. I also agree with Monisha, who pointed out that other ways to increase revenue, where we have so many apartment buildings coming up, and they need to pay their fair share of rent, being them coming, made them into multi-dwelling. So I oppose this ordinance, and please, I urge the committee to refuse this ordinance. Thank you.
We have one more. Okay.
Hi, I'm Anjali here. I'm a resident at One Ridge Terrace. I'm appreciating this process, which looks very democratic to me. I'm an outsider, not only to the town, but also to the country. But what's surprising to me is that each of one of the residents here has made a very premium investment in this town, knowing how quiet, quaint, and safe it is for us as families. The premium we pay is largely driven by this, along with the education our kids receive. I think in this whole process, if anybody deserves equal vote or more weightage on their vote, it is the residents. I get the feeling, looking at this whole process, that somewhere that looks very skewed by just the fact that even a feasibility study hasn't been done. I therefore really, really hope that this ordinance will not be passed today. All people present on this panel are representative of each of the residents here who has voted them there. I really hope that they'll think of us as residents with equal and more weightage to the votes, and not necessarily driven by revenue and sales, which the whole world is driving towards, but not what families really want. Appreciate the process and the time being taken on this, and I really, really hope that something very wise will come out of this process. Thank you.
One more.
Hi, this is Bonnie Adams, 94 Meadowbrook. So thank you for the opportunity. I also oppose the ordinance. I am not anti-retail, but definitely anti-restaurants in our backyards. Last year, I think it was the summer or the late spring, we noticed an influx of mice all over, and some of my neighbors actually had them in their homes. Thank goodness we didn't get them in our homes, but they were all over, and some of our neighbors' cats were eating them around our neighborhood. And that was traumatizing for us to see. And the only thing that had changed was Bocconi was operating illegally in our backyard with, chairs outside and, just operating. And I think that if this becomes a long-term thing and permanent, it will have a really damaging impact on our homes, the value, and just the quality of life. I do not want to walk outside to see, mice running around. We moved from New York for that reason. So I really want to just implore that you consider us, and if you were living here, would you vote yes? Because it's going to have an impact on our lives. And some of us have young children. We plan to stay here for a long time. And just looking down that road, it just looks bleak. We have a lot of neighbors who are selling their homes, and moving out. If you just drive down Meadowbrook, you see a lot of homes on sale. And if we're driving our neighbors away just because, of this ordinance, I think we should definitely think twice. Thank you.
Jennifer Patina, 64 Great Hills Road. I don't live by the houses that are going to be impacted, but I have friends who live there, so I'm speaking in solidarity. I just want the councilwoman and councilmen to think, what would you do if you lived there? And I oppose the ordinance for everything that everybody else has stated. So just think what you would do if you lived there and you had, I just heard the mice problems or all the other problems. Yeah, just for their sake, I oppose it. Thank you.
Anybody else want to make a comment that's in the room? Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break before we come back. And have our professionals answer all the questions and comments that were done. So everyone take 5 minutes.
I'm a troublemaker. That's it. So that's what's well, that's good to get. This is what I say. I might say this in my comments, if I'm repetitive, just cross it off. They're tired. They can hear since 5 o'clock.
Mr. Phillips? Are you
Yes.
Excellent. All right, so now we have the opportunity for any of our professionals to answer any of the questions or respond to any of the comments that were made from the public.
So there were not a lot of specific questions regarding the ordinance language per se. There was some request for clarification, but most of the comments were either in favor or opposed, and for the reasons that were cited. So I'm going to be brief and just address what I think are sort of open questions. And then I'd also like to just briefly respond to Mr. Steck's comments.
Great.
So early on, there was a request for clarification about how the conditional use standards would be interpreted relative to the 125-foot standard. And just to be clear, if an applicant does not meet the 125-foot standard, then it would need to meet every one of the specific conditional use standards. If not, then it would have to go to the zoning board of adjustment. And I will tell you that some properties, by their very dimensions and locational characteristics, cannot meet the buffer standard. And they would, by necessity, would have to go to the zoning board. Secondly, there was a comment and request for clarification about what I'll refer to as the separation by street exclusion in the ordinance. And this is something that Alex looked into as well. And we kind of both took a look at this. And there are actually only several instances where this would come into play. And in particular, we were looking at the area on Millburn Avenue across from the Commons and Annie Says. But for the most part, this would come into play. But I think even more importantly, from sort of a planning and zoning standpoint, the real need for protection as we saw it was from immediately adjacent properties, not those across a street which we felt would be too restrictive. The last set of comments, Mr. Heller had a comment and a question about the waiver of the parking requirement in the B4 under section 607.4. And I think his concern was that existing parking lots could not be taken away under the ordinance, which did relax the downtown parking standard. And he is correct the way that is currently written. And he's also correct that Perkins Eastman, one of their recommendations was to consider eliminating the downtown parking requirement altogether. We were cognizant of this. This was discussed. And I think this is something that needs to be considered in the future after there's more analysis and study and discussion with the township committee. It really hasn't yet been vetted. And I think it needs to be vetted before you can be in a position to basically make that leap. That's not to say that that's not a recommendation you shouldn't consider. It's being advocated by your downtown vision authors. But we felt what's in there now was sort of an appropriate immediate step that can be taken to loosen up that parking requirement. And the only other thing I'll respond to is Mr. Steck's comments. He indicated he prepared a memo. I've not seen that memo. And needless to say, I would disagree with Mr. Steck. I think the conditional use standards are indeed specific and absolutely clear. I think he cited the air handling standard in particular, but if you read the second part of the sentence, it's absolutely clear what has to be met in order to meet that standard in terms of specificity. He also indicated that there may be conditions of prior approvals which would no longer be effective, but he didn't offer any documentation or study of those approvals and the extent of the conditions, so it would be hard to respond to. But again, notwithstanding that, and more significant and importantly, I think the intent of this ordinance is to look forward as opposed to looking backward. So, Mayor, that's all essentially the comments that I have in response to the public comment.
Mr. Falcon, do you have any?
Two quick ones. Although I think Paul touched on it. Mr. Morial's question, whether a D3 would be necessary. If there is a conditional use is a permitted use, so long as the conditions are met. If they are not, then it becomes a D3 matter, which goes to the Board of Adjustment.
No, it's not a dialogue right now, so we're just responding.
I hope it's pretty clear. A conditional use is a permitted use if the applicant meets the conditions in the ordinance. If the applicant cannot, then the applicant must go for D3 variance.
Okay.
The
What's your
other
next
thing has to do with Ms. Pasternak's comment. I don't remember specifically my correspondence with Ms. Reppert, but I most certainly didn't misrepresent anything. I remember that there was, no, I did not. I would never misrepresent a fact in a memo or to anybody else. I understood that there was an application being made to the Board of Adjustment and said that, and that was my understanding. I did not misrepresent anything.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald, do you have any comments or responses?
I do not. That hasn't already been addressed.
Okay, do any of my fellow,
Oh, your mic.
do any of my fellow committee members have any comments or answers to any questions that were reported?
I have a question for Mr. Phillips.
Ms. Sure.
Mr. Phillips, if there's 125 feet, the restaurant is coming within that, so it's say 115 feet, and they clear those 6 or half a dozen requirements, they still need to go in front of planning board. Is that correct? Because they are within that 125 feet area. You're muted, Mr. Phillips.
Paul, you're muted.
Paul, you're muted.
I believe that since they are still come under the conditional use initially, if it were the initial restaurant going in, they would still have to go to the planning board. I believe that's the way that Eileen has interpreted the ordinance consistent with the MLUL. And Alex, am I correct on that?
Yes, and I think also just keep in mind that various uses have different parking requirements, and so a change in use may still also trip parking requirement that needs to go before the planning board.
And now that was the question, and there was a comment is last year when this 125 feet requirement was about to be taken off, this came to the TC here. It was going to be completely taken off. And I went with Mr. Wasserman to the houses there in the back and actually walked and talked to the residents there. And we actually came back and Mr. Wasserman was kind enough to talk to the other TC member internally here, and they recused it. They took it out and they did not vote for it or vote on it. And I guess you all know about it. And then this year, after a year later, this has come up again when we say that we have read this and we have done more work and came back. I think it was pretty nice and pretty good up there, and thought process was great there. But last year they took it back, and this year they came up with all those requirements for just to kind of support that B3 zone. So just, I think there was some confusion with some members asking or some resident asking if we took a walk there or not. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. So you.
I move that the public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on the final reading in accordance with the law.
May I have a second?
Second.
You can't.
Oh, I'm
You moved
sorry.
it. I need a
Sorry.
second. I'll second. Great. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Eglo,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Wasserman,
Yes.
Mr. Benayak,
Yes.
Mayor Prubis.
Yes. Ms. Stahl Eglo will now present ordinance 2579-21. I'm just gonna get Ms. Miggins.
All right.
Great. We're waiting for Ms. Miggins to come back into the room.
We're treating it.
Committeewoman Agalo? Okay. Where is she?
Welcome back. Okay. I present for consideration an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 257921. I'm speaking, please. I'm speaking. Bond ordinance to authorize the making of various public improvements in, by, and for the Township of Millburn in the County of Essex, State of New Jersey, to appropriate the sum of $855,000 to pay the cost thereof, to make a down payment or fully fund an appropriation from the Capital Improvement Fund, to authorize the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation, and to provide for the issuance of bond anticipation notes in anticipation of the issuance of such bonds. These include equipment for the fire department, apparatus, a cost of $341,000. Did I mix them up?
Yeah, this is the
Very
bond
helpful.
ordinance.
Okay, so I don't say anything. Okay. Okay.
Mr. McDonald?
Yeah, so this is the bond ordinance that was introduced at the last meeting, which is for the 9/11 memorial, as well as Shortles Avenue DOT project and the flex parking removal.
And I declare the hearing open. Please remember that you have 3 minutes during public comment. So please be respectful of everyone's time.
My name is Jeffrey Feld, live in Alexander Lane, Short Hills, New Jersey. Regarding this bond ordinance, I have several questions. I've asked for documents through Oprah on June 4th. I still have not received a majority of the responses I have not received. First one was including the legal opinion whether a certain person whose business is located within 200 feet of the flex parking has a disqualifying conflict of interest. I've heard no written opinion. I've not received one. I think that one thing we have to look at. Because we were not allowed to speak on the bill list, I have a certain question as how this bond ordinance works. $90,000 of it as a down payment has to come from the Capital Improvement Fund. On your bill list, you've been showing for the whole year, money's come from your Capital Improvement Fund. But some of the Capital Improvement Fund is encumbered and some is unencumbered. I don't know how much has been allocated that's unencumbered that can be used for the deposit. Because that also affects the next ordinance that you have. That's the information. Also, the question as to cost. How did the $450,000 get determined? You sent out for bids or quotes. I don't think you received them yet. How did that number come out? There's also a question that we're all talking about. At the last meeting, we had a discussion about two-way streets reconfiguring the downtown. And then there was questions about if we rip out the flex parking, or if we do adopt the two-way improvement, the street flow, do we have to redo the work again, like double, triple time? Then there's an issue as to special assessments. As a taxpayer in this town, we paid for it the first time it was put in. Now you're asking us to pay for it now again. And we probably might have to pay a third time when you take it out for flex parking. There's a question as to what properties are being benefited from this. Should they have a special assessment rather than all the taxpayers? But also there's a new wrinkle that I don't think really I have not focused on. I'm trying to focus on. Because of the federal aid that's coming out because of COVID and infrastructure, would monies from federal streetscape improvements be able to be used to pay down this loan? Also, when we had the memorial, when it was originally presented to us, it was told that it would not cost taxpayers any money. It would be paid by grants or donations. Here you're asking taxpayers' monies to be used for them. But the real issue I have is the conflict of interest issue that I think we need to have, because we remember at the prior ordinance we had, one council member recused herself because of the effect that she was within 200 feet. The question is, does that prohibition still apply to this ordinance? And that's a constitutional question I have a right to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Feld. Does anybody else have a comment? Okay, close the public hearing.
Can I ask a question?
That's fun for before. I mean, we could try, but I'm pretty sure.
Just put their hand down and.
Yeah. Yes, you can.
So I think there is another, and I was confused too, so, and I've cleared this question. This is not that we are going to spend, this is an approval process right now for appropriating or appropriation. When we actually spend on that, there will be another resolution that will come. Mr. McDonald, if I'm explaining it wrong, could you explain it?
Well, I think you're pretty much there, is that it's an authorization to spend. So in other words, in the DOT project, we are authorizing the fact that there is 300 and some odd $1,000 that are being applied for a grant. The project may come in at $250,000. Therefore, we are going to authorize $250,000, but this allows up to that dollar amount if it should be that amount. That does not necessarily mean the $855,000 is what's going to be issued in debt.
Right. So, and whether we spend on it or not could also be taken off. We can vote no for that project when you come back with that project.
You are authorizing the project with this, but you can, if it goes out the bid, you can deny that bid. Yes.
Okay. I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading and the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law. May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Miggins?
Yes.
Ms. Bigler?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Wasserman?
Yes.
Mr. Banayak?
Yes.
Mayor Purvis?
Yes. Deputy Mayor Wasserman will now present ordinance 2574-21.
Thank you, Mayor. I present for consideration ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2574-21, capital ordinance of the Township of Millburn in the County of Essex, New Jersey, authorizing the making of various public improvements and acquisitions in, by, and for the township, appropriating therefore the sum of $1,624,700, and providing that such sum be so appropriated shall be raised from capital improvement fund of the township. Mr. McDonald, do you want to give an overview of the?
Yeah. Yeah, as everyone knows, this is an ordinance that was publicized in the wrong paper. We had already introduced this ordinance. However, it was published in the Montclair Times. We reintroduced it. Now this is the second reading public hearing on this. This is our general capital improvement fund. This is the money that is budgeted in the 2021 budget for various items such as apparatus, drainage projects, road projects, things like that within the township.
I declare the hearing open. Does anyone want to make a public comment?
Again, Jeffrey Feld. Again, last time when we had the first and second readings, first time, I asked a specific question about how it's being paid for. When you look at the budget, when you appropriated monies for this year, it was only 1.5 million. The ordinance is more. The question is, what is the source of those monies? I think the public is, again, going back to the bill list, accounting of the monies, or is this going to be at the end of the year where you're going to take and reallocate monies? Because just now, before, you just appropriated $90,000 to pay your down payment for the bond. How much money have you been taking out from the unencumbered fund that left over from last year, December 31st? I know this might, your eyes could glaze. You've been here since 5 o'clock. These are issues that we have to look at. It's about the broken windows. How do we get, money is fungible. How does the money go into one pot to the other? We need to be able to track it. And that's what a lot of the people have been trying to look at, to track the monies. I still didn't get an answer as to the conflict of interest issue.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Anybody else have a comment? Okay, we declare the hearing closed.
I move that the hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on the final reading in accordance with the law.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Miggins?
Yes.
Ms. Bigler?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Wasserman?
Yes.
Mr. Banayak?
Yes.
Mayor Purvis?
Yes. Ms. Delaglo will now present ordinance 2578-21.
I present for consideration an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2578-21, ordinance supplementing Chapter 3 of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Millburn to include an ordinance to control the presence of rodents and other vermin at retail food establishments. Whereas the Township Committee determined that there is a need to require certain actions by food handling establishments in the township to mitigate the presence of rodents and other vermin that could affect public health. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
I declare the hearing open. Does anybody want to make a public comment? I close the public comment.
I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law.
Second, please.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Ms. Miggins?
Yes.
Ms. Iglesias?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Wasserman?
Yes.
Mr. Banayak?
Yes.
Mayor Purpose?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Vinayak will present ordinance 2576-21.
I present for consideration an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2576-21, an ordinance of the Township of Millburn, County of Essex, State of New Jersey, authorizing the establishment of a government energy aggregation program. Mr. McDonald, you want to just explain a little bit more, please?
Sure. This is the ordinance that we had introduced regarding a town-wide energy aggregation program, which is an opt-out program that the township would look to, if passed, subsequently pass a resolution entered into the Henderson area aggregation program and provide additional green energy, hopefully at a lower rate for our residents.
I declare the hearing open. Does anyone want to make a public comment?
And Jeffrey Feld, there's two really questions. The way this program is presented, we understand the purpose is to get more green sources of energy. But affirmatively, we don't have to, the burden is on the homeowner or the business to opt out of the program. That's the way I understood it. The reason I said I got knowledge of it is when my daughter bought a home last 2 weeks, and when she was changing, and I look at Seattle, because Seattle's the future of this type of stuff, is that when she was the new owner, you were given the option. And you keep on saying the price is going to be down, but I can tell you in Seattle, prices, we pay a higher rate. And then, will the homeowner that has the existing system need to opt out? And when someone buys a property, do they have the option to opt out at that time? The question is, why is the burden on the person that likes the energy now to opt out? If you really want to be part of this program, you should be opting in rather than us be forced to opt out.
Any other comments?
Richard Footer, 333 Millburn Avenue. In regards to the aggregate energy supply, I intend on opting out. I've had a very bad experience over the years. I call them third-party billers. You can opt out at any time. That is what they'll tell you. But by the time the change takes place, you're into your third billing cycle. And if you don't do it the right way, because they're not going to educate you when you call to say, I want to cancel, you have to do it a certain way. They are not regulated by the Board of Public Utilities. Only the actual utility companies are. So by the time you get done, if you want to opt out, you're into at least two, usually 3 billing cycles, and the price from the actual company could actually go down, and you'll be paying more, like you were on a budget plan. So I had that experience, and they were very cavalier about it, and I did threaten to go to the Board of Public Utilities, and they very nicely said, well, we're not government. So I've never gone with another third party when it comes to utilities. And I've watched it. And when the utilities go down in price, these third parties don't
adjust their price. And oftentimes the utilities wind up going below. And I don't own any stock.
May I?
We're gonna, it's
Oh,
still open. for
I'm sorry.
hearing, So okay, we're still open for public comment. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Priya.
Hi there. Good evening. My name is Priya Patel. I live at 9 Farview Road, and I just want to take this opportunity to respectfully ask that the Township Committee authorize the establishment of a government aggregation program for our town. Government aggregation is also commonly known as community choice aggregation because it's truly about increasing choice and involving the community. This journey was started, to my knowledge, back in 2018, if not earlier, under the leadership of then Mayor Eglo. And we weren't able to seal the deal back then because the rate was not favorable. But with Committeewoman Eglo's encouragement, we explored other options for our town that involved partnering with other JCPL customers like us. And that's how we landed on the Hunterdon Co-op. Energy aggregation, in the simplest of terms, allows towns to combine to aggregate their purchasing power for electricity and thereby get the best rate per kilowatt hour. It allows us to get a better price for power, more choice to us, the consumers, and because of that better rate, it affords us the ability to include more green, renewable energy in our mix if we opt up. It is not mandatory. And this is why so many municipalities across New Jersey, if not the country, have entered into energy aggregation partnerships. It really, truly transcends political ideology, and it enjoys just huge bipartisan support for this reason. As chair of our town's environmental commission, I ask you to take this step forward for our town, as it would represent a really big win, not just for our pocketbooks, but also in our fight to address the climate crisis. Thank you so much for your time.
Is there anybody else want to make a public comment? Okay, close public comment. Does any other committee members want to make a comment?
Yes, I want to thank Priya for saying that so beautifully. And I also want to add that it's not like a third-party biller. It is actually something that our JCP&L rep, Mrs. Bianchi, actually JCP&L favors this. It is something that's a positive for the community. And I won't repeat everything Priya said because she summed it up beautifully.
Does any other members of the committee have any comments?
Will we have a type of a card or something if somebody wants to opt out of the program that we can help them do that? Where will we put a notice up? Where will we be able to help someone if they wish to opt out?
Maybe that could go on our website.
Oh, there's a ton of information and education that goes along with these community choice programs and opt-out programs. Yeah.
And this company mentioned that they will be always available to all of our residents.
Okay. I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on the final reading, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please? Ms. Miggins?
Yes.
Ms. Del Eglo?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Wasserman?
Yes.
Mr. Banayak?
Yes.
Mayor Prupus? Yes. Thank you. Okay, we are on to old business. No, we're not, just kidding. We're on to resolution 21-187, authorizing signing of government energy aggregation program agreements. Are there any comments from the committee in regards to resolution 21-187? May I have a motion to approve 21-187?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please? Ms. Miggins?
Yes.
Ms. Del Eglo?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Wasserman?
Yes.
Mr. Banayak?
Yes.
Mayor Prupus? Yes. Now we're on to old business. We're going to revisit the JFK Parkway cell tower. Mr. McDonald, do an update for us on this.
I don't have any further update except for that I provided the township committee with an area depiction of where the cell tower could be located. I have been, but it has been some time, in touch with Verizon. However, the next step, if the committee is willing to explore the possibility, of placement of a cell tower at this location would be to authorize me and the professionals to go out to bid for that.
What happened to the leaf compost that you were trying to look into to move that function out of town? Because that was overall as a,
Well, I think in terms of focus, I think I was focusing on the cell tower and, the rest of that area. I mean, you're talking about 300 square feet in this area. Or I wasn't focusing on the leaf composting site and everything else. I think that's been in discussion, of course, but it was in particular that aspect of it.
And I think we also talked about wanting to make sure that that we get the max. That, in other words, that more than one
company.
Company can can put their equipment on it. We want to make sure it's advantageous for our residents.
That's how all of these towers work, is that the bidder comes in, and let's say Verizon wins the bid or T-Mobile wins the bid. They build the tower, then they lease out the space on top of that tower to various different companies. And the township can receive lease dollars for the structure or for each additional lease that goes on to that tower.
Also, it's important to note that our emergency responders get top use of the tower, and I know there are dropped areas. I just think this is something that we have to offer our residents. There's poor cell phone service. We see it all the time on Work Moms. We hear our neighbors, we're talking to our friends. This is a bonus. It's something that we're giving and offering our residents, and we are getting revenue out of it and taking up a tiny piece of that 5.5 acres. I think it's something we need to explore.
Okay, so the next step with Alex would be to, Mr. McDonald would be to start drawing up the bid specs, not putting out to bid, just drawing them up for us to review. Yes.
Mr. McDonald, I don't want you to lose focus on the leaf compost functionality as well, to be taken out of that and use that for the field. So if you could please put that also on your plate and not just forget about that and
No.
just go with the tower.
No, sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so is there consensus for Mr. McDonald to move forward with the bid specs of the cell tower? Yes. Yes. Okay.
Great. Get back to
And we'll continue to look at the options of moving the leaf.
Thank you.
Zoning accessory use revisions. Mr. McDonald, do you have anything to report?
Just that I provided the committee with a draft of this zoning ordinance, which was developed by Mr. Phillips. Essentially what this does is accomplishes the objective of requiring multifamily dwellings to have on-site loading and unloading. Currently in 607.1, there is no requirement for dwelling units. This would add a multifamily housing developments containing 5 or more dwelling units as be required to have at least one loading and unloading space. It also provides for, under 609.13, the prohibition of rooftop decks in order to protect the health, safety, welfare, and residential character of the township. The placement of decks, platforms, terraces, and similar features on the roof of a building for use as a common amenity space for building occupants and guests shall be prohibited. For purposes of this section, a roof shall mean the exterior surface covering the top of a building and shall not include an interior courtyard area above a parking garage that is enclosed and otherwise screened from view by the building.
I thought Mr. Phillip would be here, but I know I've clarified this, but I want to clarify again. It's not just for the car parking for loading and unloading. It is also for trucks that is used for move in and move out on premises, whether it's indoor or outdoor, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But it needs to be not in the public right of way.
Correct. And I think I provided you, Mr. Vinayak, the other information in the zoning code that spoke to this.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay.
But it wasn't clear on the truck versus car, so that's the clarification.
Well, it's more about what the definition of a loading space is and and that is what it means. So if it would, because otherwise it would just be a parking space added to. So I think the point is that a loading space is the ability to house trucks delivering whatever it may be to that location. For instance, in the current ordinance, it has a loading requirement for a retail store. And that retail store is usually going to be receiving delivery of clothing or something like that. It's going to be in a box truck or some other thing. So it will have the necessity to be able to provide space for that loading and unloading.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Mayor, I don't have any more questions. If agreed with, okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Did we also not talk about, in addition to the rooftop decks, side decks, no side decks on properties?
That was a residential component. This is about the a multifamily dwelling.
We need to also include it in the multifamily as well, just so that there's no questions.
You mean balconies?
Balconies. We need to talk about that.
How do we go about it?
Well, I think that the next step is to take these and do some public information sessions on them and speak to the community about it and get their input so that we can then kind of craft something. So I don't know what is your desired timeline?
I'd like to move this quick, but I would still want to follow the process. So what is your recommendation, Mr. McDonald?
Well, I think that certainly there's a month between the next meeting. I don't know that would be that may be adequate time. So I think we just have to play it by ear if we can develop what the mayor is describing and be able to get information out there. But in either case, if it's introduced in July, it must go to the planning board at their first meeting in August. And then to the township committee in your meeting in August. If it's introduced in August, then I think there are 2 meetings in August in the planning board. Therefore, you can have it introduced at your August meeting, go to the planning board, and then the first meeting in September be final reading.
I'm fine. I don't want to skip any step, but all I'm trying to do
That
is
would be
just
all the steps
follow it.
included.
Yeah.
Great. So within the next
It doesn't matter. I mean,
month,
yeah, let's
we will
just,
have 2 or 3 information sessions with the public to gather input on these 2 ordinances. And we will have them in front of us in July. Okay, does any committee member have any other old business that they'd like to address tonight? Does any committee member have any items of new business that they'd like to address tonight? Okay, we are at the time in the meeting of public comment. So please be mindful that there's 3 minutes allotted. Be respectful of everyone's time tonight. Be respectful that we're all neighbors. And if you'd like to make a comment, please come to the podium. State your name and address.
Owolabi, 46 Maple Street in Millburn. I'm very shocked that all of you actually voted yes unanimously to ordinance 2577-21. After you've heard from your residents that they don't want this. Tara, you just said now we need to talk more about it. Let's get the residents' input. What is the purpose of getting the residents' input if they're not going to be listened to? And Mr. Vinayak, you actually promised. I mean, you mentioned that you spoke to the residents of Glenwood. When I walked it last Saturday, no one ever mentioned seeing any township committee person speaking to the residents. I spoke to a lady who actually put her house up for sale just because of this ordinance. I'm just, I don't know what else to say. Millburn residents, just know that I hear you. This is not a political thing. This is that you guys don't want any opposition to your voice. You want a one voice township. And that's what's going on here. When I'm elected, this is not going to happen. I can't believe it. All your residents are here. They're speaking. People are calling in. They're talking about rats. Bacone Restaurant, did you go there? If you guys did, you will see rats in Millburn. A well sought after neighborhood that everyone wants to, like, what are you guys doing? Just listen to the people who elected you. You said just now that we're gonna talk more about it. Okay, we're gonna talk more. You're talking, but you're not doing anything for the residents. You're putting landlords over people who actually purchased a home. I've been here 14 years. I didn't just move into town. And I wonder how many of you still have small children in the schools? We need fields. We don't need a cell tower. We've been managing for how long? We don't need compost in this town. We need fields for our children to be able to play in. Listen, please, just listen.
Jay Morelli, 1 Claremont. I think the irony is not lost on anybody in this room that the township is talking about holding public hearings about rooftop decks when we've been asking to give input in such a forum as to the ordinance that you just passed. Obviously, many people here, including myself, are disappointed. I do want to respond to the comments, though, that Mr. Phillips made, and I wish he had not dropped off the call. If you go back and play the tape of him earlier speaking, he said, quote, any restaurant within 125 feet will need to go to the zoning board. Mr. Vinayak, you corrected him. You said if they meet the requirements, they need to go to the planning board. The planning board and the zoning board are very different groups with very different purposes. The planning board is required to approve any application that meets the requirements. The zoning board, however, is the place where you need to go to ask for a variance. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Falcon. Getting a variance is far more difficult than getting approval at a planning board where you meet all the requirements. And that is the key difference. In the past, a restaurant that met all the requirements but was within 125 feet would need to seek a variance. They would need to go to the zoning board. Since you've passed this, they don't need to go to the zoning board. They can go to the planning board if they meet the requirements. The vote at a zoning board is much more difficult to get passed. The planning board requires a simple majority of the people that are there. The zoning board requires 5 of the 7 members, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, to approve. Am I right? Thank you. So this myth, and I think it was very intentional early on, that Mr. Phillips said they need to go to the zoning board if they're within 125 feet, because that was the old rule. Thank you for correcting him, Mr. Vinayak. This is a radical change. I appreciate that you voted and it's over and there's nothing we can do at this point. But please, please educate the public, educate the residents on what is really happening here. Don't promote this myth that things are going to be better because we put these 6 very weak conditions in place. Thank you.
Come in peace.
Mr. Footer, I'd just like to remind the cameraman that we actually don't, clapping isn't something that we do. So please don't start the clapping. Thank you. No, it's not. It's actually, you're disrupting the meeting. Mr. Urso, you're disrupting the meeting. One more time, you're disrupting the meeting and clapping. Mr. Cameraman is disrupting the meeting as well. So thank you. Mr. Footer, yes.
333 Millburn Avenue, I come in peace. Prior to the creation of the new SID, Mayor Lieberberg requested a meeting with me and Committeeman Wasserman.
It turned out that they wanted to see our vacant commercial space on Millburn Avenue. I seem to recall that meeting taking place on July 29, 2020. While there, the two of them wanted to see what was outside the building. We walked through the side emergency exit door and I showed them the collection of dumpsters surrounding the building like an anklet from the neighboring restaurants. They asked, who is the property owner? I told them, you are, Millburn Township. I told them that those dumpsters have presented issues for several potential tenants. The dumpsters are still there. I started bringing this to the attention of Millburn Township in 2018, maybe earlier. So, how do the proposed changes in the zoning ordinance correlate to this? If the reason for the SID was in part to reduce the vacancy rate, then why didn't you take that ball and run with it? Prospective tenants, new topic, prospective tenants asked if construction would continue on our block. I answered, I did not think so, but I don't make the decisions. I will not make any false representation, especially to a new business faced with committing to a large investment for fit out and startup. When asked that question by yet another prospective, I sent them the town hall to ask. They were answered, not at this time. That one walked also. Last but not least, affordable housing became a paramount issue due to the Mount Laurel case, and its most simple interpretation said that if people were good enough to work here, they should be good enough to live here. Somewhere there must be a formula for that. People used to actually get up and go to work. Then during the pandemic, if they were lucky to have a job, they telecommuted. As business reopens, large concerns are planning for a mix. Many offices are contemplating 2 or 3 days in and the rest of the week to be work from home. How does that fit into the affordable housing equation? Do we really need to plan a transit village, sorry, Carrie, or a redevelopment with as much additional multiple housing? As an audit of what malls, other businesses, and various professional concerns project as to what the future in-house occupancy will be compared to the pre-pandemic, the lower number should equate to a lower need within the township. It may be better to serve the community to take the lead and push for a re-examination of what the actual requirement will be if the circumstances have changed while remaining in keeping with the spirit of Mount Laurel and the law. For the record, I am against the changes in the zoning ordinance in all the business zones regarding the 120-foot buffer and the change from conditional to permitted use. There are better ways. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jeffrey Phil, live in Alexandria. Approximately 3 hours ago, 2 policemen took an oath to defend our Constitution, state and federal Constitution, and enforce the laws. I am shocked that this board, with the consent of the VA, city attorney, and unfortunately the Mr. Clerk, took the position that citizens have no right to be heard prior to consideration or official action on any agenda resolution involves taxpayer trust fund monies. Last week, I appeared for the local finance board. Local finance board, which governs this body, they recognize the right of citizens to be heard before official action is taken. Regarding the bill list that we were not allowed to speak on before, there's certain issues that I've been asking for. You hear about KPIs, but what about seeing how much revenues we're getting, how we're operating, and how it fits into our budget? On your bill list, there's something called the Capital Improvement Fund. Each month, you're taking monies out of it. We should be able to know how much is coming from the encumbered amount and the unencumbered amount. That went to the ordinances that we had a little discussion about. In addition, there's something called the Off-Duty Police Trust Fund. On this bill list, it shows you that the monies are allocated to 3 different areas. One goes to the actual overtime salaries of the police officers. The other one seems to be a reimbursement if you use police cars, and then there seems to be an administrative fee. I think the public should be able to know cumulatively how much money we spent today in each of those categories. In addition, we should be now known because you approved the shutdown of the main street for the summer. I don't believe you did a survey. You did a survey for the flex parking, which was questionable what the outcome was. How did you determine that we should do that? What are the costs? The people that have tents that now that COVID is over, are they gonna pay for the spaces that the tents are on? In addition, when we have policemen at the corners, where's that money coming to pay for? We've been told in various ads that the music is free. Nothing in this world is free. The music was paid for by our taxpayer dollars that you send to the CID that's subject to litigation. I have a question. When you approve the payments to your municipal attorney, who other than the BA reviews the time summaries? He signs off on it. I'm always a month behind and I make an open request. It's wild that we paid the municipal attorney to do research as to the validity of his contract under state case law. It's ridiculous that we paid to do research how to quash the deposition of the former executive director of the CID. The public needs to know how we're spending our money.
Thank you, Mr. Felton. Does anyone else like to make a comment? You know what? We should actually go to, let's go to the Zoom.
Yes, I think, yes, hello. It's Beatrix Shear, 101 Oakview Terrace. Related to Congressmember Benayak's concerns about loading zones, I've written to the members of the Township Committee about the proposed curb cut, which would be the loading zone at the Woodland Chatham Silverman project that's being planned. There was no loading zone proposed by the developer, except when the issue came up, there was a suggestion that there be a curb cut on Woodland Road to allow for, I guess, move in, move out, delivery vehicles, medical transport vehicles. The township would have to approve the use of or give over, I guess, right of way to its sidewalk, to a substantial portion of its sidewalk for this curb cut. And my request to the Township Committee is that it let the developer know up front that it cannot and will not do that. There is no parking on either Woodland Road or Chatham Road in front of where the development is going to be. I assume that's because there are visibility problems that parked cars would create. So we just simply cannot have large vehicles or really any vehicles parked on Woodland Road where the curb cut is planned, or on Chatham Road. And the developer needs to know this up front so it can plan for a loading zone, which it should have planned for, in its garage, or some other arrangement can be made for a loading zone. Or I guess in the alternative, there will be no loading zone at that property, and delivery trucks, medical transport vehicles, move in, move out will have to be at the closest across the street or wherever they can find to legally park. I do appreciate, Mayor Purpose, that you got back to me that the township would be looking into this. So I'm wondering, where are we with that?
Ms. Chair, we'll respond to you at the end of public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Amaral, you're muted. Was the hand raised new? It was? Okay, we'll come back to her. Let's try Mr. Helder. Oh,
Hello, yes, I was muted.
we can hear you.
Yeah, I just wanted to second what Owen said. I'm actually very disappointed that the TC still went ahead and approved the ordinance despite 50+ residents raising concerns. I think I do not understand the hurry to kind of get this approved. You could have dug deeper. I think, Tara, you mentioned that you wanted to hear the concerns. I was just wondering if the TC has the ability to reverse their decision and maybe spend another month just going through all the concerns that the residents have raised before this ordinance is put in place. We're only asking for another month, I think, for you to reconsider your decision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hildner, are you on the line?
Yes, can you hear me now?
We can.
All right, thank you. I would, Tom Hildner, 10 Exeter Road in Short Hills. I'd like to make 4 comments. The first one relates to the last meeting on June 1. That meeting ended in a very precipitous manner when, Mayor, you got into a dispute with Ms. Stone, and you got very angry at what she was saying.
Hildner, Mr. Hildner, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second just to set the record straight. I did not actually speak at all. That was Committeewoman Miggins. So I was listening to Ms. Stone. I didn't say a word to her, but please continue.
I didn't say that. What I said is you got into a dispute with her and you then, and then Ms. Miggins was involved in it as well. My objection is not that you're going to get into a dispute. That's natural and normal. What my concern was the way the meeting was precipitously ended. And I didn't even hear a motion to adjourn, but forget that for a moment. I mean, the fact that somebody says something that, for example, a committee person might consider inappropriate or objectionable, even obnoxious, is not a reason to end a meeting like that. And as a result of that, a number of comments that were being awaited with respect to various questions that were asked were never given. And so that was one objection. Secondly, one of the questions that were pending is when Mr. Viniak said, we're not going to engage in mediation. I don't care, I'm not interested in mediation. I said, well, that's very generous spending by you of the taxpayers' money. And why is it, after Judge Moore recommended mediation, why is it that you will not participate in mediation? And is it because there is no chance whatsoever that the SID suit will be successful? So I never got an answer to that as a result of the way the meeting ended, and I would like to get an answer to that tonight. Third, I think it's very clear that the time limit of 3 minutes is not adequate when you have a professional witness like tonight, Mr. Steck, who had developed a report and had much to say. It's one thing to have 3 minutes for somebody like me or someone else. It's another thing to have a professional witness. I assume he was not appearing free of charge, wasn't a pro bono effort, but important information was cut off by, in that case, a strictly arbitrary time limit, and that needs to be changed with regard to professional witnesses. Otherwise, it may be, but you have to show some flexibility. And lastly, there was a charge made tonight, Mayor, that you were involved in a conflict of interest that should have prevented a vote on the restaurant ordinance. I would like to get an answer as to whether or not you believe you were in a conflict of interest or why you were not in a conflict of interest. I have no opinion on the merits, but I think when that kind of statement is made, or we'll call it an allegation, it should be responded to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hildner. Does anyone else have any comments that they'd like to make, public comment?
Jean Pasternak, 342 Hobart Avenue. I want to say congratulations to the newly promoted police officers. We appreciate you very, very much and the risks you take on our behalf. Thank you. Please pass that on. I also want to say congratulations to Committeewoman Miggins for her thoroughness and their demonstration of good character when discussing, earlier this evening, one of the matters that you dug into deeply. I hope that you all will learn from that and that you will see that you can represent all of us, not just those you know, that you have personal relationships with, that represent your party. Everybody here has your obligation to represent our interests. And I hope that you saw that clearly demonstrated by one of your colleagues tonight. I also want to point out to Mr. Falcon about your comment. I forwarded earlier today the exact memos that were obtained by Oprah of the letter that Ms. Repper wrote to you, as well as your response. I think all of you should look at it and make your own judgment as to whether this was either incompetence or lies or what, but it sure as heck wasn't an accurate response, as far as I'm concerned. Thirdly, sorry, I want to make a comment about some concern I have about abuse of position of power. Unfortunately, not everybody's here to hear this, but we're investigating a police May 2021 noise summons involving a certain property on Parsonage Hill Road where a member of the Township Committee was attending a party. It has been alleged that he attempted to quash the summons. That's a serious matter, and it needs to be addressed. If this individual has any character, they will confront what we're talking about and deal with it openly and honestly. I'd like to ask, why were the two resolutions pulled from the agenda, 21-183, 21-174? Can you explain why they were pulled? Well, I also like to concur about the use of the word free when it's taxpayer monies that are actually being used to fund activities in this town. It's fine to use that in a colloquial way, but you need to explain that people's money is being used to supply this music downtown. I think it's misleading and it's not honest. And finally, the health department that issued the food safety certificate to Pecan South in December 2020 for 1 year. So they were operating in April of 2020 and issued a food safety certificate December 2020. Something's wrong with this picture, okay? Somebody approved something that then went to some other department that approved something that they shouldn't have, and another department, apparently, according to these people at the health department that spoke on behalf of Mr. Anello. What I think you owe us a detailed explanation, Mr. McDonald, as to how this occurred, and if there are any other establishments that were treated in the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pasternak. Anyone else want to make a public comment?
Dominique Urso, 514 Millburn Avenue. First, I'd like to start off saying, please rescind the SID Ordinance 2561-20. For the reasons, unlike Mayor Prupus, who falsely stated at the last June 1st TC meeting that there are 2 objectors to the SID. That's not correct, as I actually have 7 letters of commercial property owners that are opposed to SID and didn't know much about it. Secondly, payments made to Falcone and Marzini for Bear Properties litigation is shameful when this committee was given the opportunity by attorney and a judge to mediate rather than litigate. And I'm appalled that this committee, and especially Committeeman Eglo, unfortunately, when she originally voted no on the SID ordinance August 11th of 2021, along with Committeewoman Miggins and Vinayak stated in one of their campaign statements of September 4th, 2020, committing that they would not use paying property taxpayer dollars. So I just wanted to know what, why the change in all this. And this is on the patch, so it's not fabricated. This is on the web. So nothing I'm saying is disparaging or false. Everything's, on the internet. And, I will not be pushed away. I have roots here. I will always be here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm established in the community. I will always be here. Whether you guys are here for a reason, a season, or whatever that expression is, you're not going to push me away. You're not going to damage my name. I have a good reputation, okay? You're not going to disparage me and other people that just truly care about the town, and you laugh and you giggle with each other, and I don't know what's so funny or why you want to beat us up and paint us in a manner, but I'm not going to be pushed away. I'm sure you wouldn't want anyone to treat your young daughter as I feel you treat me in this forum for some reason. I feel disrespected. Miss Becker, before she was in your seat once before, I just felt you should give her the same, she didn't do anything that you couldn't just let her speak for a few more seconds. But I don't know. I'm someone young in the community. I'm invested here. I care about the town. I care to be more involved, and you're not going to scare me and push me away. What you're doing is you're trying to not be welcoming and want a younger crowd to participate here, but I'm not going anywhere. So you can keep trying, but it's not gonna work.
Thank you, Ms. Urso. Oh, you have 30 more seconds. And you're totally welcome to use them, and you're welcome to speak, and you should come up and use them.
I just hope please treat people with more respect.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else want to make a public comment? All right, public comment is now closed. Sorry.
Jeez, how fast do you want to hammer that golden gavel? Okay, so congrats to the police promotions. I love when we spend money on the police, especially, I thought they were all here for me tonight, but I'm really kind of feeling bad about that. But anyway, on July 3rd, I'm sorry, I want to talk a few issues. There's another 2 weeks, another meeting. Where is the 501c3 letter from the IRS? Did we get the 501c3 for the Special Improvement District? Which hopefully you can answer that, Richard, since you're the liaison for that. I also want to address, which I learned tonight, Jean came to my shop because she came to the town hall for the Board of Health meeting, and she couldn't find where the meeting was. So I think that needs to be addressed. She called me, I said, come on over. I hooked her up on the Zoom, so that's why my name appeared on the Zoom and she spoke, so I wanted to clarify that for the record. On July 3rd of 2020, we sent an email to Alex, and on July 6th, he responded that he was going to look into this situation around the footer building, because again, I brought an investor to the building and they were like, what happened? I took a picture even today. It's a parking lot there. God forbid there's a fire truck can't even get into the alleyway of that area. And that is absolutely a fire hazard and jeopardizing all of the restaurants that circle that spot. So you need to really address that. I want to know why the town is allowing 17 prime parking spots by the clock to be empty all week. I have empathy for Academia. I suggested to Alex that you move them to the plaza to give them a fair share so they're not playing chicken with food, crossing the street. It's ridiculous. It's a danger and another potential lawsuit for the town, frankly, a business and for the liability of the town. So you need to address that because parking at Charlie Brown's was being used by customers for in and out running in. Unfortunately, someone is now in charge of that, self-proclaimed to be charged. We still don't know what the deal with that is. And on the last note, you have called me out, Jean, you, Tara, called me, Jean, Jeff out. There were 20 other people, including the DCA, on that email that you are talking about. You should have called everybody out. So be an equal opportunity offender. You should have called everybody out that was on that, including the state. So you want to just pick the few of us, that's your choice, but we'll be addressing that in the future.
Thank you, Mrs. Jones.
Don't thank me.
Okay. Public comment is now closed. Do any of the committee members or the professionals would like to respond to anything that was said?
I can respond to one thing that Ms. Stone brought up. The SID did not receive the 501c3 yet. We understand that there's a huge backlog at the IRS. And
Okay.
we're waiting.
Anybody else? Yes.
I'll just address a few things. One is with regard to, and this is a little while back, Mr. Feld's comments about where the money is coming from for the capital improvement ordinance. That was asked and answered at a previous meeting when you asked about the budget being only 1.5 and the spend being 1.634. I had mentioned that there's a capital surplus, which money is taken out of to make up that difference. Anybody is welcome to visit the township's website where past audits, past financial statements are located, which will give you the information about unfunded and funded ordinances. The second thing is to answer the question regarding Lot 1 and Caramia. that is being addressed. Next week, they will be out of there. That lot will be opened, and it will resume parking, of course, being closed on Tuesday for the farmers market. They are actually going to look to have a parklet. Yeah.
Mr. Falcon, do you have anything you want to say tonight? I want to follow up with Ms. Shear's comment about the loading zone and the cutout. Do we have any information about that?
So I have written down the note there. I think the cutout, and I was in planning board meetings, all those meetings that was done for 85 Woodland. That is a done deal, and that cutout was a part of the negotiation. So ordinance negotiation, whatever that was. But as far as I know, that couldn't be changed. And I actually waited for the voting to happen on that. And after that, I brought this in here, so it doesn't impact whatever the negotiation was done there. I was mindful of that. So I don't know, and I don't think there is anything that could be done before this resolution gets passed. Whatever gets done before that may not get impacted by this resolution. There's another, if I can.
Right, well, I just want to make sure that we have confirmation that that was part of the settlement agreement and that there's nothing at this point that we can do.
I think, I don't want to speak for you. I think that you're referring to the resolution yet to be adopted, approving the application with that cutout shown on the approved plans, that the cutout is approved, or will be approved when the board adopts the resolution. I don't think the resolution has been drafted yet, has not come before the board. You had a vote. Resolution
Oh,
being
here,
prepared.
but it came from planning board. It was.
That planning board has not yet adopted a resolution approving that project.
Okay.
And that the approved plans, which we'll vote on, have yet to be memorialized, show the cutout. So I think you're correct. Subject to our seeing all these documents, that's a done deal with the cutout.
Okay. Okay, so your answer is that there's nothing that can be done at this point. It's already been approved. And even though it's the township's right away, that was what the planning board approved.
That's
those
my
cuts.
understanding. We'll have to see
Can
what
you
they
check
say.
into that so that we can get Ms. Shear, a formal response to that question? Okay.
And there's another gentleman who questioned last time and questioned this time again, mediation versus litigation. We are in litigation on that case. I don't think we can talk anything about it. Mr. Ken?
That's right. Wouldn't have that. I know Tom Eldner knows Judge Moore. Many of us do. He's an excellent judge. It was a case management conference. My partner attended, was trying this case. And Judge Moore asked the parties to go back and think about mediation. After consulting with our client, reasons on liberty, easy to discuss. He reported back to the court that Millburn Township was not interested.
And on the SID support, last year while campaigning, I wrote the article and I've always been in support with SID. I've never said that I'm not opposing SID or opposing SID. I've always been supporting SID. So I'm not sure the articles that anyone is talking about. Sure. So, but it's always been, my support has always been for business SID.
Understood.
Thank you.
May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Motion. May I have a second?
Second.
All right, good night,
Thank you.
Millburn Township.